You better be listening to Sleazoids or I must break you.
Well, I got the proper medicine for that cat. A 30-30 slug right between the eyes.
There was Kurt, the hunter, who wanted the cat in his sight.
This film acclaimed by critics as the most violent motion picture ever portrayed on the screen. Notorious gang bent on the slaughter of human souls for a small fortune in gold, and even more precious, their freedom.
Living in the shadow of fear cast by a giant black panther, a prowling killer cat that leaves in his track the same lust and tameless passions that mark all their lives.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Sleazoids, the podcast where we go down the rabbit hole of 20th century genre fare, from the most influential canon classics to the trashiest exploitation films we can get our hands on, and invite you to tag along in helping us create a canon of sleaze. Each week is a double feature Grindhouse style where we discuss two films loosely related by subject, genre, actor, filmmaker, or franchise, and at the end of each episode, along with our honorary Sleazoids, which you can become by subscribing on Patreon.
This year, our gift to you is safety from edged weapons. And you absolutely need to sign up. It's for your own good over the holidays, and that's all I'll say right now. So join that sleaze.
We decide on all the official ratings and rankings for every film that we cover. Patreon subscribers also get an honor shout out and 2 bonus episodes every single month, which we are coming up on 5 full years of bonus episodes. That's like 120 plus, as well as our bonus transmission series, which we've almost done like 40 of. So if you haven't made the jump yet, patreon.com/Sleazoids podcast. Go check it out. And speaking of which, we do have a bunch of new signups to give their shoutouts this week. We had Julian Kopkis sign up at $5. We had Damien sign up at $5. Alistair Brown, Mr. Melendez, Adam, Jonathan W. Johnson, who signed up at $10 a month, is going to be joining us for our monthly virtual screening, which we usually do on the last Thursday of a given month, although I think for the month, by the time you guys are listening to this, we would have actually already done the bonus one for this month, because we did a little bit earlier because we wanted to honor the late, great B-movie legend, Albert Pune. So we talked about, we watched with everyone in a big virtual screening. We talked about his post-Tarantino heroic bloodshed gangster movie, Mean Guns, which is starring Christopher Lambert and Ice-T, and is scored front to back to basically mambo music, and it's just a blast. So, but we will be doing one next month as well. So anyone interested, $10 a month. Join us for the virtual screenings. We also had Sixanic sign up. We had Nate Meisner. We had Samuel Harrington. We got just a couple more here. Uberlin Gizbar, Travis Nielsen, Michael Rescati, Merrick Alozi, and Ben. So thanks so much to all of you folks. Hope you're enjoying all of those bonus episodes. We appreciate the support.
Yes, thank you.
And that's the one plug for the week. The other plug for the week, as always, is Apple Podcasts or Spotify, and Spotify. If you are listening on either one of those platforms, and I see the stats, I see you right now listening on both those platforms, give us a good old rating and review down at the bottom. It helps us climb the ranks and find new listeners. We appreciate that as well. And then the very last plug, as always, is merch. If you like the poster art that based out of Toronto horror artist Trevor Henderson did for the show, you can get that basically put on anything that you can think of. A shirt, a hoodie, a poster, a pen, a pillow. You guys have bought a lot of things with the Sleazoids logo. That link is in the description, as well as over at sleazoidspodcast.com for anyone who's interested. But that is it for the intro. Welcome back to another week. As always, I am your host, Josh Lewis. And joining me also, as always, is my co-host,
Jamie Miller. Welcome back, everybody.
Welcome. I think over on the main feed for all the free listeners, the last time you folks would have heard from us would have just been 2 weeks ago, where we would have done a double feature of wacky demon body horror films with special returning guest Melissa Kay. And she brought with her a Canadian children's Fulci movie, essentially, called The Gate from 1987, directed by Tibor Tek, and starring a little baby Stephen Dorff, who summons a bunch of little mischievous guys with the power of metal music. And we paired that film with Tales from the Crypt Demon Knight from 1995, directed by a regular Spike Lee cinematographer and The Wire director Ernest Dickerson. which was a film that was like part siege western, part demon splatter movie with just a level of controlled like comic book horror mania that, you know, kind of rivals someone like Sam Raimi, and also one of the hammiest villain performances of all time by one Mr. Billy Zane.
Oh yeah, he's leaning into the comedic aspects of the film. It's so funny. He has what was that line that you posted a bunch of times?
Oh yeah, you fuck this cowboy shit, you hoe down podunk motherfuckers, or whatever.
Proceed to punch a cop right through his face. It's just an unbelievable film.
His fist gets stuck in his skull. It's wonderful. So if you haven't heard that episode, that was over on the main feed 2 weeks ago. I'd recommend going back and listening to that one. But last week, over on the bonus feed, over on the Patreon exclusively for our listeners there, we did your patron-voted episode, which, once every 2 months, we introduce some democracy and we let you folks vote on the double feature that we talk about. And you guys, last week, gave us early 80s sci-fi fantasy films that are kind of considered black sheep projects within the careers of respected auteur directors. Mm-hmm. We talked about David Lynch's Dune from 1984, which is just a beautiful, strange mess as much as it's been talked about and advertised. And we paired it with Michael Mann's The Keep, which is a very moody dreamscape fairy tale about a giant ancient demon killing a bunch of Nazis. And both were adaptations of novels that were severely tampered with in post by the studio. I think actually both were meant to be 3 hours, and David Lynch's was cut to 2 hours and 15, and Michael Mann's was cut down to 90 minutes.
Which is insane.
Yes, so both are kind of considered incomprehensible and were considered huge failures for both filmmakers, but due to the style, they definitely both retain some psychedelic dreamlike qualities. So if you haven't heard that episode, we talked about that last week over on the Patreon, so go check it out if that interests you at all. But moving on to this week, we have a very special returning guest who was actually on last year to send us into the holiday festive season. Last time she brought with her these bizarre, quasi-misogynistic, extreme 90s erotic thrillers, which was a great way to celebrate the holidays. She is a self-titled genre film fanatic. She's a freelance film writer for places such as Film School Rejects and CinemaScope magazine. Actually, alongside me now, we were actually both covering the Toronto International Film Festival this year for CinemaScope, watching some good movies and some bad movies together. But that guest is Meg Shields. Meg, how you doing?
Yeehaw!
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, that's all I got. Yeehaw, baby!
Yeehaw! All right, peace out.
Goodbye.
We had a good run. Well, it's funny because like when we had you on, because if I recall correctly, we talked Disclosure with Michael Douglas, which was a movie about what if a woman had office power and assaulted a man. You know what would happen? Yeah. And then we talked about William Friedkin's Jade, which was all about the scary serial killing side of sex work. And I think when we did that episode, you pointed out to me that I happened to choose that episode because you sent me 2 photos and you said depending on which photo I selected would be the double feature. And the one photo...
I sent you 2 stock photos and you chose... So it's your fault, is I think what we concluded.
Yes, because you sent me a man in a sweater at a computer and you sent me a cozy winter log cabin, and I chose the man at the computer, so that was... that was Disclosure last year around this time.
Well, yeah, Michael Douglas goes into the cyberspace, so it's like I couldn't think of a more Michael Douglas photo.
That's true. We definitely had a blast doing that. But I think if I'm not mistaken, this week you are bringing on what would have happened behind door number 2 if I had selected the other one. So what are we talking about this week, and why have you paired these together?
So we're going to Snowy Cabin. We're doing 2 winter westerns. We're doing Track of the Cat and Cutthroats 9, 2 very normal movies.
Oh yeah, very happy.
Yeah. So we've got kind of a Western that came out at a time where traditional Westerns were still being made. Track of the Cat is, I think, 1954. But even though it was coming out alongside pretty traditional Westerns, it really embodies some of the spirit of the neo-Westerns that would come a bit later in the 60s and definitely in the 70s that would challenge what makes a Western and kind of just destroying the foundations of American myth-making. And it's very much like almost like a Douglas Sirk family drama. And then Cutthroats 9 is not made by Lucio Fulci, but you have to imagine Lucio Fulci watching it and just like his eyes becoming like hearts and him realizing what he wanted to do with his life. It's a Spanish Western that was very much drawing from spaghetti Westerns, but also kind of happening alongside them. And it is very gritty and silly and very depressing. It is like very famously one of the most kind of horror adjacent Westerns ever made, which I think is accurate. Like I struggle to think of another Western that like doesn't go out of its way to like actively include genre elements that I would classify as a horror movie. And yeah, it's just like a big bummer of a time, but it's shot in the Pyrenees, and like when I watch it, I want to go to there. But yeah,
yeah, both of these are incredibly bad vibes.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. What do you mean? I'm noticing a recurring theme on the movies that I bring you. But yeah, no, I actually really adore both these movies. I repeat watch them a lot, and there's something about watching winter westerns in December and in the winter that really scratches my brain nice. Like I love westerns that butt up against traditional westerns, and like almost every snowy western does that.
That's true.
Yeah. And then Criterion stole our idea, Josh.
I know. Kidding. Well, that was the funniest thing. They announced it. They announced a winter western series, and they put Track of the Cat in the series. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Meg selected this movie like a year and a half ago to do, and it just so happened. But you know what? I will just say, look, you know what? The movie is widely available on the Criterion channel. So you have now, anyone listening, you have no excuse. Go to the Criterion channel, watch Track of the Cat, come back. Because both of these, I'd say, are pretty underseen based on logs.
And not only that, Cutthroats 9 is free on Tubi, and the transfer
the people's streaming
the
service.
transfer is good. So if you can like stomach some ads, go to Tubi. They don't need our advertisement, but Tubi good.
It's I agree. I've actually watched a couple of the movies that were on this show that were more obscure on Tubi, so it's pretty good.
Yeah, they're pretty ruthless. They service. So. I don't know if you've ever checked out their like what we're tossing out at the end of the month section, but they truly just like cycle through things. Like they're not like oh, we're getting rid of 30 movies. They're like, we're purging the closet. Have to respect it.
Hell yeah! So both of these films are available for streaming, which is good. Because they both they don't have too many logs, so people got to be checking them out, and we're about to explain why. But that being said, I think we're going to jump into it here. Let's start off with Track of the Cat.
Wait a minute, hold on.
Uh-oh.
What?
Oh, I thought you were insinuating they didn't have a lot of logs because they suck, but that's not true. They're very good movies.
No, just obscure.
Okay. Okay, yeah, no, let's talk Track of the Cat, the film that includes the strangest pronunciation of panther ever.
Yes, I can't wait to get into that. Let's do it. All right, we are talking Track of the Cat, the 1954 American Western directed by William A. Wellman and based on the 1949 novel of the same name by Walter Clark, making it Wellman's actually second adaptation of Clark's work, since he also wrote the novel for the other Wellman we've actually covered on this show. And this year, the Oxbow incident, which we paired with 12 Angry Men when we had special guest Jason Buford on talking about those. And the film was also adapted by the writer who wrote one of my favorite noirs ever, Kiss Me Deadly. So this is a pretty cool combination of filmmakers. And for anyone who didn't listen to our episode on the Oxbow incident, William Wellman, one of the weirdest American directors ever. He was a delinquent boy from Massachusetts. In his early age, I think we broke down in that episode that everyone just knew him as the kid who played hockey and stole cars and worked in lumber yards. And he was eventually drafted into World War I, where he was a frontline fighter pilot who saw real action and reportedly shot down at least 8 aircrafts, which when he got back to the United States actually inspired his film Wings from 1927, which is probably one of the earliest and most immersive examples of dogfighting on screen. He even taught Buddy Rogers how to fly and invented cameras so that they could shoot real footage inside biplanes. This man was he was Tom Cruise of the 1920s.
Am I wrong in saying that Wings is the first Best Picture winner also? I believe that's true.
That might be true. I haven't looked that up. That might be
I
true.
haven't seen it yet. It's been on my list for a while now.
Wings, baby, number 1.
Nice.
The first one. There you go.
Baby.
God damn it,
Wait,
Williams.
let's make sure it's not a different Wings.
1927.
Yeah, baby, Billy Wellman, let's go.
Yeah, so there you go. William Wellman, the first ever winner of Best Picture, and was also an insane pilot who invented cameras to do it. And he would eventually go on to work in all kinds of genres: comedies,
When you're
noirs,
so good
dramas.
At flying planes, you invent the Best Picture Oscar.
That's right. That's a life right there. He also did the original Star is Born that was then remade a bunch of times. And his big breakthrough was the pre-code gangster film for Warner Brothers, The Public Enemy, starring James Cagney, which is a real dark and mean and shocking piece of crime cinema about a poor kid being kind of corrupted into a full-blown psychopath. And very famously, that movie is considered one of Martin Scorsese's favorites, and he's very inspired by it. Especially the really expressively, the very expressively shot passages in that film. There's a shootout that takes place inside a building while the camera remains on the outside, listening to it, and it just has one of the darkest endings you'll ever see in a 1930s film, which also translated actually to the Oxbow incident when we talked about it, because we were for a fucking Western of that era, that thing is fucking dark. Though it's the whole movie is a slow build to a bunch of guys hanging a bunch of innocent people, and the movie ends with them just hanging the innocent people and then finding out they were innocent, and then that's the end of the movie.
It's so devastating.
Please clap.
Oh my god!
It's a huge, just builds and builds and builds to a huge brutal anticlimax that's just incredibly feel bad. And
this one carries that same kind of sadness for, I would say,
in terms of feel bad tragic Western. Yeah.
I would say 9 out of 10 of the 9/10 of this film is absolutely just devastating, and then we'll get to the finale, which is a little strange, I found, just with everything else that's going on, especially comparing just to the Oxbow incident. But very depressing stuff, just lonely and
it's giving seasonal depression.
Definitely.
This was a very interesting one. Meg, what was your first experience with Track of the Cat?
I think I literally Googled winter westerns. I was like, I don't know that one.
I'm feeling that vibe.
Yeah, and then I watched it and I was like, oh shit, this is really good. And it's I don't know, movies that have the energy of plays are, I don't know, there's especially older films that have the energy of plays feel really good, which is why this film is so funny, because it's not based on a play, it's based off a book. But I don't know, it's so character driven and everyone is acting their little hearts out in a way that only 1950s stock players could. I don't know. I love this movie, and I love the dynamics, and I love how it leans into more symbolist storytelling. That feels very antithetical to modern or traditional westerns of the time. It's great.
Yeah, there's something about the isolation of where they are. You don't see anybody outside of this family. And so it just feels like they're in this very like empty space a lot of the time, and it's pretty focused on the setting of the house. I mean, they go out and they look for the cat and all of that, and there's some kind of like wilderness stuff that happens as well.
The Black Painter.
Yes,
the Black
Painter.
But so much of it is just like watching, the dad being drunk and hitting on the young girlfriend, and then Harold trying to find his manhood, I guess, and the mother dealing with all the devastating death that's going on and loss, and her kind of more, I guess, really staunch religious beliefs that have affected the family as well. So like it was a lot. Just given the premise where they were like going to go out and get a cat, I was surprised at how melodramatic it was, instead of like the more, I guess, action heavy beats that it could have taken. Just with
and how drenched in mood it is too, right?
Oh yeah. And kind of mystery too. Like the they mentioned a couple times with is Joe Sam, I believe, the Native American man.
Which, by the way, played by the little boy from It's a Wonderful Life in horrendous makeup.
And
worth noting up front for anyway.
He was the original Alfalfa, also in like a Spirit Halloween like rubber mask. I would be offended by it if the makeup wasn't like so fucking bad.
Yeah, because it's so exaggerated. Like it makes him look like 150 years old, and then they have
he looks like a walking tree.
That's because he was still technically like a kid. Like when they made this, he was in like his late 20s or something, and they were like, you're gonna play like a 80-year-old native man.
Yeah. And then they have these stories about Joe Sam where it's like they don't know his exact age, and that he could, if given the timeline that they know about, he could be over 100 years old. So there's this like layer of mystery to him or something like that. And I guess that's when the makeup kind of worked for me in that sense. I didn't know that it was a white 20-year-old playing it, but just in the way that it works within the film, well, no, I didn't. No, they didn't necessarily get me. I definitely could tell it was makeup. I just thought that was more like an on purpose physical attribute to him because of his supposed age and how they didn't really know where, I guess, he came from entirely. They just trust his stories that he's telling them.
He's definitely one of the elements of this film that is of its era in comparison to, or like pre, like of the old Western versus so much of the rest of the film, which is kind of pointing forward to where the Western genre was going to be going with the level of kind of bleakness and coldness. This, again, it's not to say that there hasn't been bleak ideas expressed in older Westerns. I mean, the Oxbow incident is a 40s Western, right? And we did My Darling Clementine, John Ford as well, which has some pretty dark elements to it as well. But what's interesting about this is that there's a level of just like immediate harshness to this, because you would think that with there's a way to approach winter vibes where it's cozy, you get the cabins, you get the fireplaces going, but this, it's like long shot of Robert Mitchum, on a horse, heading towards the snow-covered cabin. There is this, these horrible sounds waking everyone up in the middle of the night on this ranch in Northern California, and the harsh sounds of the winds are blowing by, and we're introduced to the Bridgers brothers, who are all woken up by their native hired hand Joe Sam, who thinks that the livestock are being disturbed by this mystical, vengeful Black Painter, or a Black Panther, which every single one of them calls it a Black Painter, which threw me off. Like, there's a painter out there. We got to get that painter, and
just Van Gogh crouching in the woods,
yes,
eating a cow.
Yes, this painter. He arrives with the winter. As Joe Sam, the snow comes, the Black Panther comes to curse them for, they sort of imply for like their colonial violence, but also they want to like track down the panther and hunt it and kill it before it harms the family. And we're introduced to all of the brothers being confronted with the situation of the livestock as being tormented by this creature. We have the eldest and the most sort of like responsible brother, Arthur, played by William Hopper from Rebel Without a Cause and the Maltese Falcon, We have the youngest and sort of sheepish future of the family, Harold, played by Tab Hunter, who I've actually only ever seen in an underrated Western called Gunman's Walk, but I believe also was supposed to be
a John Waters film, Josh?
I haven't seen the one that he's in. He's in Polyester, right? I've seen Female Trouble, and I've seen what's the one where she eats shit? I've seen that.
Pink Flamingo?
Pink Flamingos, that's right. Yeah, so I've seen a couple. I've seen probably like 4 or 5 John Waters. I just haven't seen Polyester, which I believe is the one that Tab Hunter is in. But also Tab Hunter.
I could be wrong.
Tab Hunter also in this era was actually supposedly inspiration for Rick Dalton's career, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. So he was supposed to, apparently he kind of had that he never really took off. He kind of had like that unrealized, he could have been a star type quality to him. But both of them are superseded.
Very on brand for Harold, I will say.
Yes, both of them are superseded by the cruel and boorish brother Kurt Bridges, played by God of Cinema, Robert Mitchum,
King,
who not many people can say it, had probably an iconic performance in every decade from the 1940s until the 1990s, basically, if you start stacking them up, like Night of the Hunter, Ed of the Past, both Cape Fears, Friends of Eddie Coyle, The Yakuza, Dead Man. The guy was just in everything, and in this
could not be stopped.
He just gets to chew. I love his bright Christmas red overcoat. He is just dripped the hell out,
and he's like the only one with color, like really, because it's almost grayscaled and all the snow and everything like that. Like he
I
really
know
the
director said he wanted to make a black and white film in color, was like his visual approach to the film.
Right.
Which is cool.
I'm glad he didn't, because it looks real pretty in color, because we get that red coat. But it does have that like winter thing of just color leaching out of everything just by virtue of it being winter. But you're right. I'd never noticed that before, that the red wool coat is kind of the only thing we get. Even the quilt on Art's bed is black and white. Like we get nothing.
Yeah, I mean, he wanted to get the sort of monochromatic, subdued shades in there because it was such the opposite of what others were doing. Like, for example, the year after this, Anthony Mann would put out The Man from Laramie with Jimmy Stewart, which has similar like beautiful scope compositions. But it feels so populated with life and with color, and this feels like it's just been drained of that because of years of like bad history between these characters.
Vibes.
So they intentionally downplay color so that they can highlight it in either specific moments, like with his big red coat, which really stands out, which is like it does feel like an idea of like him trying to kind of assert his individuality a little bit and kind of fight against the sort of more repressed elements of the family and mundane elements kind of the household, which it feels like it's kind of playing up with the lack of color.
And he does seem as a character to have this mindset that he could be like the savior of the valley and the family and all of that. I mean, even when they wake him up initially to do the job, he's at first just like, fuck off, like don't even talk to me right now, I'm sleeping. And then as soon as they give him the scenario and it's like, oh, you can kind of be the hero, you can go out and get this cat, he seems to jump up and respond to that. So he seems to be someone that,
which, can we also just say that is such a funny premise for a movie.
What, killing a cat?
Yeah, just going out and killing a cat. That is mostly like that is Robert Mitchum's whole arc in this film, and unsuccessfully killing a cat. Actually,
I was gonna say, Jamie, you were talking about the isolation of the film earlier, and like I really do think this is a siege movie. Like they could leave at any time, but they're very much like trapped there of their own, like by the bonds of just being toxic together. And like
that's true.
And in the end, the outside forces beating down on the house are kind of the Panther, but mostly Robert Mitchum. Like he's not there, but every second word out of the parents' mouths are like, "Where's Kurt?" Like he's oppressing them, even though he's not there. He's miles away, like in a cave, like trying not to die.
And at one point, the sister's even mentioning things like, if you like, she hopes, a part of her hopes that he's not out there dying and he's going to come back, but she also knows that once he comes back, everything is just going to go back to the same bullshit that they always have to do every single day. where it's just arguments and, not understanding each other, and seems like they have a lot of secret kind of hatred within themselves.
Well, and
for
full
each
on
other.
controlling one another, and
God, this would have been
trying.
such a devastating movie to watch during the peak of the pandemic. If you were trapped with your parents.
Oh my God.
I'm glad that thought did
Literally,
not
this
occur to
movie
me.
is about a kid being beaten down in his house and having to learn to go outside.
Yeah, pretty much.
and be a man ultimately is
Right.
by killing the black cat, like that. It's a very simple story, and I do love that it cross cuts between what is two very different stories. Like on the one hand, as Meg mentioned, you have this very Douglas Sirkian level intense melodrama, very, very heavy, very gloomy stuff. And on the inside, it is trapped inside the house. It's almost like a stage play. Like you have the stone wall, sort of like fireplace. You have the black metal and the white wood finish, and you're just kind of sitting in this sort of kitchen and bedroom area. And you have this generational melodrama taking place inside, where this family unit is just basically pushed to its limits and undone by just what seems like years of building, just general neglect, a little bit of abuse, a little bit of just bad feelings kind of all bubbling up, and these sort of second generation kind of kids ultimately having to, deal with these very strange old mentalities and kind of old bitterness and even bigotries and the drunkenness of the father too, and having to kind of learn to assert themselves.
Plot happening in the house because you're right. It is simple at a bird's eye view, but I love the complexity of the relationship between them that kind of bubbles up over the course of the film, and all of the kind of succession stuff and inheritance stuff feels so real.
Yes.
Of just the younger son being I can't ask for anything, and then Kurt being I'm not going to ask, I'm just going to take, and then the older one being I don't care.
I just think everyone should get their fair share.
Yeah, and it feels very I don't know what the word I'm looking for is. A moral story where it's three brothers with very different ways of moving through the world, and the film kind of does it makes sure to kind of let all three of them make their case for why their way is best, and in earnest. So even though Kurt is the way he is, he's the most capable. I don't see anyone else doing what he did. He does definitely get shit done, and there is a value to that. But is it a tenable way of existing? No. And then the first brother, his kind of pacifism route doesn't work out well for him either, even though it's definitely the least wave makey of the three. And then our hopes kind of lie with our third option. So I don't. It's very. I don't know. It feels like an old story or something in the way that it's there were three brothers and they all one was an asshole, one was a pacifist.
Yeah. And one was just right, but he learned lessons
and
from
one was
both.
was trying to adult.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, yeah, and it definitely, you're right that it kind of presents each and every single one of these characters we meet has a very prickly personality that kind of rubs up against the next one, which is definitely very dramatically rich to watch on screen, especially when you're trapped in a room with characters, watching these people fight with one another. You do have the brother Harold who, has this young fiance Gwen, played by Diana Lynn, who, he is trying to marry, but she comes from a poor family, so the mother is very skeptical of her and thinks that she's just trying to basically marry on to the ranch property, and she's looking at Harold and going, well, you're the youngest brother, you're not even going to inherit any of this stuff, what you think she's going to move into a room with you? And then you have the brother Arthur being well, why don't we just carve out a space of land for him ahead of time and build him a little house over there, and he can work the property with his new wife, and
barn raising, it'll be fun.
yeah but the mother is just this very bitter kind of religious zealot, basically played by Bela Bondi, who is
another goat.
Actually,
she's so
yeah,
good.
I was going to say Mrs. Bailey in It's a Wonderful Life, considering talking about the It's a Wonderful Life sort of
Maybe
connection.
That's how he
there.
got the gig. I'm kidding.
Maybe. But yeah, she is skeptical of this. She doesn't want to split up the property, and that way she kind of feels like she has her own machinations going on, where she's kind of dealing with Kurt and thinks that Kurt should be in charge. And then you also have the sister Grace, played by Teresa Wright from Shadow of a Doubt, which we actually have also covered on this show with friend of the pod Adam Naiman. I think was the last time we talked about Teresa Wright, and she's fantastic in that film. We'll talk about another film too about sort of the sort of domestic spaces just being like irreparably torn apart in that film as well. And then we also have the drunken Pa Bridges,
our
who
only
is just
glimmer of comedic relief, which comes at a horrible price.
Yes,
that's the thing. It's like some of his drunken ramblings and that one incredible shot of him just stumbling up the stairs into his bedroom until you hear a broken glass. Like there is aspects of comedy, but just the
or
more
him just like
time
constantly
you spend
having
with him,
secret bottles of liquor hidden throughout the house.
yeah, and the mother like telling the sons, please go hide it because he's never going to stop, and all of that. Like it does tell you the history just through the way that they speak to each other. But yeah, he has kind of like this slightly comedic tone to him, and then the more time you spend with him, the more you're just like, oh my god, this is what they deal with every single day. Like he gets up, he drinks whiskey, he starts hitting on Gwen. He mentions.
I love the detail that he gets up and shaves that day for her, and the mother can tell she's just like really he's prettying himself up because his son's fiance is coming over, and he's very clearly sexually attracted to her, which obviously pisses her off. And then also he'll just walk around the house screaming like, "These thieving females have stolen my bottles."
The line "thieving females" makes me so happy. It's so funny. Thieving females.
he literally says it like
multiple times. It's good.
He even mentions like when there's that, and we'll get to more detail, but the scene where Harold and Gwen kind of have a little moment, an intimate moment together in the farm or the barn rather, and he mentions to his wife that it's like, did you learn anything when you saw them making out?
Oh my god, I love that scene.
Like it's
so
just
good.
It's so he doesn't hold anything back.
They were
as a
kissing.
character.
We could use more kissing around here.
He's like, oh, were you being a snoop? Well, did you learn anything? Because you're a clothespin, you dumb bitch.
He has
So
he has
good.
such resentment for, it seems, his entire existence and his family and everything like that. And it gets really hard to watch as it goes on, even though
the
he
whole
is a
thing
mess.
just has that air of bitterness, right? Like this cold family history that has clearly been happening for years in this house, and we're just introduced to it by these people sniping
We're
at each other.
very much like Gwen. Like we just got invited over and we're like, what the fuck is happening?
going on?
Oh, no.
Yeah, and they're just like exchanging ugly glances and like wishing terrible things on one another, and you're just kind of like, oh my god, can you guys like chill out a little bit? Like you honestly. You want the escape of Outside, where you have the mission where they're tracking down this this Black
to watch
Panther.
Robert Mitchum get stalked by a massive painter.
Yes. Like even the early scenes when it's Arthur and Kurt both go out together, and you just get those like beautiful CinemaScope compositions of them riding on horsebacks and in the snow, and they're dwarfed by the trees and the snowbanks and the Rocky Mountains. Just this sort of majesty of nature, which is what you always kind of get when you're talking about the winter westerns. And it is a little threatening, like they look a little small. They look like they could be swallowed up, and there definitely does become this sort of like paranoid element to them being out there. But it does feel like these guys kind of have a little bit more of they can test themselves against something. There's a little bit more of like a physical domination they can kind of
It's
work
more
out.
familiar territory, definitely, in terms of like what a Western was at this time.
Yeah. And just having to like even out there, like Artie and Kurt are also still getting into family fights, and that's what Kurt has to like split up with him just to stop them doing that. But they do say like he's the kind of impulsive brother who does good work but needs to be reined in so that he doesn't hunt like everything to make it like a completely unsustainable life for all of them. but also, that they, he should be nice to his brother. He should give his brother a little piece of the land. He should stop conspiring with the mother to strip the entire family when the father dies, or sell the property out from underneath them.
Yeah.
There's so many different plans. I couldn't keep track, actually.
I know. Yeah. And speaking of the mother, like, every time I watch this film, I do think she's the most complex character. Like, she's definitely given the most like pitch black, horrible shit that a family member could say to another family member. But she also gets these moments where she's like clearly self-aware. Like when she's watching over Art's body, she's like, I think she's talking to Howard. She's like, it's impossible that your father and I could have had such a good child. Like we are both terrible fucking people. I don't know how this happened. Like, like she clearly knows that she's a piece of shit. And like, I think later in the film, she's like, every bad thing that your brothers have, or that Kurt has done to you two was my fault. Like I do realize that I enabled a lot of his behavior, which almost makes all the bad shit worse. Like, I feel like it really deepens her character. Whereas if she was just like an evil, whatever, vile hag, that'd be one thing. But she's allowed to be a three-dimensional person. She's allowed to talk about her past, about like her and her husband did not want to homestead, but somehow wound up doing it. Like, we're given a lot of insight into who she is, which I think why it's such a dread-filled film is that this really does feel like a family with problems that you like. It doesn't feel as blown out of proportion as Douglas Sirk problems. Like, it really it sticks the landing in terms of kind of, I don't know, really feeling real in a way that makes its silly little panther hunting party have more magnitude, I think.
Most of the sadness is really, I mean, I guess it's not necessarily subtle, but it's the way that they talk to each other. Like, there's only a couple moments where people really blow up. Like, there's that one where the drunk pa, is talking about how he like wants to leave his body, essentially just pretty much telling everyone that he hates his existence. But then at the same time, he's singing like spirit hymns and stuff. And then so the ma is like, this is blasphemy and all of that. But a lot of it is just them talking about their past, the connections that they've had within the family, and how they were most of the time pretty awful. Even the stories that they seem to tell when like Arthur is dead don't seem to be incredibly happy ones. There's still a lot of resentment and regret. And so, there's just, it's very constant and it's somber, but it doesn't have a lot of those like screaming matches that you would expect from maybe a family melodrama. And I think that's a good thing. Makes it even sadder.
Yeah, well, because it feels like it's a family already like past
Accepted
that phase.
It.
And exactly.
Totally.
And like it feels like we're watching them, and sort of symbolically, I guess, with the visuals, with how they're being snowed in and everything like that. Like, it does feel more like an entombing process.
Yeah, it's almost like with the screaming, it's like that there's something almost desperate and like you're still latching on when there's a screaming match in a film, whereas theirs are just the very quiet and depressing, and it makes it, like you said, it just makes it feel like they've accepted it already, and they're just living together because now they're trapped.
Well, yeah, and all the roads kind of like led to this, like led to Arthur being split up in the wilderness, and those big like those big wide shots of him, being chased. And I do like that there's this, like he loses the tracks and he gets killed by the Black Panther, and the gun that Kurt gave him to protect himself, like, I don't know if he had checked it right or it jams, or he isn't able to shoot. And there's this big wide shot of his horse just like running away without him as he's screaming. Yeah. And when Kurt later comes back and finds him and gives him his jacket and straps him, I do love that scene, by the way, of Mitchum. I just love the logistics of it, of Mitchum just like strapping him with rope to the horse and then slapping the horse on the ass and being like, go home. And, he's being like, I'm going to stay out here and take on the Panther. The horse is going to take this corpse all the way home for me. And which by then he switches from his dripped out jacket to his snowshoes and like cowhide poncho,
which we later learned was a fatal mistake because his food was in the
Yes.
jacket that he sent home with the body.
He messed up. But if you ever just wanted to watch a film of like Robert Mitchum just like sliding down hills on his ass
Yeah,
and stuff,
yeah.
like this is the one
Which
that you've been waiting for.
You definitely do. Let me tell you.
Yes.
Yeah, he's tumbling.
I will also say, like, I think the first time or like the very first time I watched it, I thought that Kurt had sabotaged the gun.
Yeah,
And I
me too.
thought,
That was what I almost thought.
Because they even
for a
have that
moment.
line where he comes back after and he's just like, "Don't worry, I gave Arthur my gun," and it's directly after we see the jam. So it did kind of feel like that it was very possible. They don't highlight it at all, but it just given their relationships and what we've established with the family already, your brain instantly goes there like, oh, maybe.
Yeah.
Who
I
knows?
do think, like, having seen this film a couple of times, I think that what makes a little more sense is that because Art is such a pacifist, like, he literally can't shoot the gun. Like, the gun will not comply in his hands to, like, take a life.
That makes sense too.
But I think the door is definitely still. I think the fact that we suspect Kurt of murder is very telling.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, well, and for Mitchum too, like when he starts going back out there, like he does seem really upset, and he does seem like he starts going mad and cold in the in the wilderness, like versus. There's a level of hysteria that's building for both of them, because for Mitchum, it is like this level of paranoia, like there's a cat out here that's murdering our livestock and now my brother. And for the family, it is like, well, we have kind of reached the logical conclusion of where these relationships were going to get us to. Like Arthur is now dead, and Kurt is also now lost out in the wilderness, and I'm literally like killing my children, in this kind of way, and watching her like the mother react to all of that is really brutal. Like you were already talking about the scene where she's like looking over his body and being like, like wrap him in the black and white spread. He was always partial to that, or talking about how, he was so much better than the parents were. But the scene that really stands out to me is that extended minutes long low angle shot from the point of view of the grave.
Oh, yeah.
As
I
Ma
love
and
that
Harold and Gwen and Joe Sam all look down into it, like trapped almost in like this like trapezoid framing, about to lower the casket down. And it almost takes up basically the entire frame, the casket, as it's being lowered down. And eventually climaxes on a eulogy and the cross going into the ground, basically like My Darling Clementine style. It's just it's gorgeous.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's awesome. I also love when Kurt is out, the wilderness shots themselves, like him tumbling down the hill when he's panicking in a complete like random shooting spree, because he's heard. Assumedly heard the creature, and so he's just kind of like shooting every which direction. Which
and doing the craziest thing of all, reading poetry next to a campfire. Come on, sir.
That's very
You haven't
generous.
read poetry in your life.
He keeps reading the first line, which is like, "What if you die?" And he's like, "Well, I don't know." Like,
Yeah, which then he needs to burn the pages to make a fire later, because he's like that's what poetry is useful for, burning.
I also love the just how what you'd think is kind of like a small scale problem, where he's lighting his last fire. I think it's his last match that he has, and he successfully makes the fire, and he's very excited. He's like, okay,
I love the blue tips on the matches as well. It's one of the other few like colorful moments we actually see in the film.
Yeah.
Josh just scanning the frame for any colors. Like,
Where's the color?
There's blue.
Where
There's
did you
red.
put it? What does it mean? What are you saying, Wellman?
And they actually have kind of a suspense sequence with the snow dropping, because it keeps, he's slowly building his fire with the paper that he has and the small amount of little like kindling that he can find, and then he
the dastardly wind. It just keeps blowing
kind
his
of
match out.
lowering the first it's the match, and then he finally gets it, and then it starts to kind of, the weight of the snow starts to lower the branches of the trees more and more, and it keeps cutting back to it until finally it just plops down and totally destroys his fire, just leaving him like to death. Basically, he has nothing else to do once you're out there, and you can't build a fire and have warmth, like you're absolutely screwed. And so it kind of makes him panic, and then he falls into the I don't know what it's like,
insane
a cliff or
ravine.
Yeah, ravine.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like the film
I wasn't
has such
sure
kind it's like, I don't know, like here's an actual mountain range, actual valley inside of a house, and then it's like a matte painting of a ravine. Like it's so large and like otherworldly. It looks like it should be on Venus or something. It's so cool.
And it has like I wasn't it happened so fast, his death, and so I wasn't sure if they were going to have this kind of like, okay, it's implied that maybe he's in trouble, and then they're going to go back and maybe find him on like the edge of the cliff or something and have this big like escape safety like moment between the brothers. But it's exactly that. It's just you see him fall to his death, and I guess it becomes more of like a vengeance story with Harold eventually.
Well, and my favorite part of that is because we've been watching so much of Mitchum basically just quite literally just going insane with paranoia.
Yeah.
And he's at one point he's literally talking to the panther that's not there. He's like, "I'm gonna get you. I've got all the time in the world." And he's going like, "Why?" He's sitting next to his little campfire. He's going crazy. He's traversing the harsh environments in this fearful state. The branches start creating like these shadows over his like single-minded mission for revenge that he's going to get. And what drives him to run towards that ravine is actually Harold lighting a giant fire to be like, "Come home." And that's my favorite detail, is that by the one kind gesture of being like, "Kurt, please come home. Here's the direction of home," kills him.
Which Harold was coerced into doing by the mom. So,
yes.
like, especially on rewatches, it's like if she had let Harold go, Kurt might have lived. Like,
Yep. Yeah. I mean, he wasn't looking in a good spot, but he had just set up his fire.
He might
not
not
have
have
like
a giant
splatted
100-foot
down
tumble.
a ravine.
Yeah.
Yeah. Robert
He's doing
Mitchum, by the way,
cartwheels.
apparently absolutely hated everything about filming the exterior stuff that they filmed
Good.
here.
He
like,
was
"This is
living
tell.
Kurt's
You can
the
tell.
worst time of my life."
Yeah, he was living Kurt's life in those moments for sure.
But yeah, he falls into the ravine. He kind of gets picked out kind of earlier on, and then both brothers are gone, and we're just like, holy shit! How much deeper into this like tragedy can this family kind of get? And Harold eventually goes, "Look, Ma, like I'm just gonna leave. Like, clearly you don't want me here. You would rather just have Kurt run the house or sell the property, whatever plans you have to do. You clearly think like Gwen is like she basically thinks that she's like a whore, and she's like gonna ruin Harold's life or something like that because she caught them kissing," is what she says. Like, that's it. Like, she's not an upstanding woman. She kissed my son. It's terrible. But it is funny when Harold eventually does assert himself and says like, "Look, I'm leaving. I'm going to go live with her family, and I'm going to go get work. And I don't like, that's it. You don't have to worry about me anymore." And I do like the shade of complication to that, where she gets to be like, what are you going to do? You're going to go work in the mines and get buried in the ground before your time, like work in the mines like your father did. And the sister basically just goes, basically with the line that summarizes the film, he's already buried here. We all are. And that's what it feels like. It feels like this is like a trapped family. This is the final moment where they either have to like change or like go down with the ship in this kind of stuff. And that is the trajectory of Harold, which does track, I would say, like narratively and thematically, that Harold's event, like the climax of this is, Harold has to go out and go looking for Kurt, finding out obviously that Kurt and Art have both been killed by the panther.
A great cut, by the way, where they're just like, you get the ravine and then they've already pulled him up.
Yes.
There was no room in the budget for them going down the matte painting.
No, and no room in the budget for a black painter.
No.
Yeah.
No.
Which we do not see, is mostly held off screen. And I did think it was funny because it reminded me, I don't think it's quite as well done as this film, but it did remind me of the Turner Cat People, where it's like constantly shot with just like shadowy. It's just like, ooh, there's like a bush moving, and you're like, oh, there's a panther, and there's something in there,
It's growling.
what's it? Yeah. But there's nothing quite as stylish in the action as, like, for example, in Cat People, like that pool sequence with like just the use of shadows and the suspense and the build up to it. This definitely has like they're like, hey, Harold, go over that hill. And he goes over the hill and he shoots the panther. You're like, good job, Harold.
You have avenged your brother, and now you're going to get married. You are
and now you're the man of the house. You have killed the symbol of the devil, and now we should skin the devil and turn him into a blanket.
Yes.
Well, I think doesn't Joe Sam have like one of the few lines Joe Sam gets is he's like, yeah, the panther did not scare him off this cliff, like that was his own doing, like he
yes,
like very much man versus man here. Like
which is funny after
so
like hyping up
is a red
the sort
herring,
of mysticism of it a little bit.
Yes,
you're right.
But I do think like the kind of way that the panther storyline gets wrapped up in the end so quickly, I think does tie into the fact that it does show that the cougar was just a red herring the whole time, that like the real villain was just like all these fucking chaotic people like just being ridiculous, and this panther was just like, I'm just chilling. Like, don't mind me.
Yep.
Yeah. And then it does kind of have like it tries to have like the catharsis of they do sort of like eliminate this thing that was, terrorizing them, even though obviously we know that it was something else like entirely that was making them feel, the way that they were. And Harold has kind of like assumed his place at the head of the family, which definitely does feel like, I mean, I would watch that and I would go, okay, well, he's going to be like the new Kurt now. And I do think the film tries to have a little bit more of like an optimistic reading of Harold becoming kind of like the man of the family versus like, they don't want to completely indulge you in just the perverse tragedy, even if that's like the version that I seem to always prefer. Everyone gets mad at me when they're always just like, Josh just doesn't like it when the ending is
Everyone
the most
should die
miserable
all the
thing.
time.
Yeah.
Josh is like Kurt should fall down the ravine, cut to black roll credits.
It should have been Harold being really happy about, becoming a man and avenging his brother, and then he should have fell in the ravine, like directly after.
And then the panther shoots through the window and murders everybody.
There's a second panther, and it kills the whole family. Yeah, totally.
Yeah, but I will say, like, to be fair, just to be fair to me out there, for anyone who's listening,
the movie does feel like it kind of deserves a more.
This movie sustains that grim mood for so long of the movie that it does kind of feel like it just kind of like comes a little, not out of nowhere. Like, again, it builds up to, Harold's arc absolutely makes sense. It just feels like it happens really quickly. Like he shoots the panther. He's the head of the family.
It feels like the only happy moment in the entire film. So I think that's where it just kind of.
Oh no, you're wrong. There's one other happy moment in the film that I love, which is when I keep wanting to say Tab Hunter, when Harold is like being whatever a Hamlet about things and being like, I refuse to make decisions, and then she like threatens to leave, and then he's like, no, I'm going to talk to my mom, I'll be right back, and like is decisive, and then she like skips away because she like mind fucked him into like being assertive. Like, and the music gets all happy for like one moment in the film, and like it's good.
My fiance is a man, finally.
Yeah, like truly, if the mom had any like land to stand on in terms of her being like a manipulative hoe, like that was it. Like, but I feel like they have a lot in common, like in that respect, like mind fucking the men around them to do what they want.
Yeah. But I will say overall, I think it's built pretty nicely, the cross-cutting between the really intense like interior stuff, which has this like aura of just like really heavy melancholy and this like, sort of like forceful emotional quality that does feel like it maybe resolves itself a little bit easy at the end. But when you compare it to how it's been working in conjunction like with the very weird survivalist Western drawn in like a little bit of mystical qualities, a little bit in sort of like guilt-ridden anxiety and paranoia and like the harsh elemental photography of it all. I think it does build in its kind of symbolism and the characters kind of being dwarfed by nature there. And I do think it does, build to, this allegory for the claustrophobic nature of like a generation and this history kind of being imposed on the next generation and the necessity that this kid needs to kind of basically like kill and bury it and kind of move on.
Do better.
Yeah, and again, it's drawn in such like this rich mood and sort of atmosphere to it that that actually, I think there was a Hollywood Reporter article that came out in the 50s when I was researching this, that Warner Brothers was considering sending this to the Venice and Edinburgh Film Festival because they basically thought that it was so weird in terms of sort of its tone and sort of emotionality that it played more like an art film than it did a studio Western. Yeah, they were like, let's go get good reviews from the French, is what they were like, literally what they were thinking.
A strategy
they were like,
still in use to this day.
Yeah, straight up. They were like, look, this isn't quite for like the American public. This is meant probably more for the weirdo Europeans who would think that the fact that it's, really sad and weird is like a good quality, which to be fair is something I agree with on this show. So pivoting, I think, towards reductive rating round, this was a pretty sort of like light to solid 4 for me. I really liked how it merged the gloomy family melodrama with the sort of mystical survivalist winter Western. And you gotta love Robert Mitchum just being an asshole and being dripped out and sliding on his ass down hills and falling into ravines and being scared of a giant cat.
And a really on set.
Yes. And having a melodrama that's so dark and bleak and complicated in terms of history and sadness that they were like let's see how the French critics review us rather than the American public, who will be like, this is just too depressing. Why would I want to watch this? This is like what my life is like. So all of that combined together, very, very solid. And also, I will just say, it is like a beautiful movie to look at.
CinemaScope, baby.
CinemaScope, it's always the best. Anytime you see that frame come up, you're like, this is going to be a good looking movie.
That's
but also Wellman,
Yes.
the decision to really strip the CinemaScope of color and only use it in very targeted moments. It really does feel like it captures this repressed family life that they're living. So yeah, just gorgeous. If you haven't seen it, again, Criterion Channel, it's out there.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I think it's a 4 out of 5. I really enjoyed it. There's a couple moments I really like. One of them is the shot where it shows I think it's Grace, I believe, and she's playing the organ next to the window, and you can see Kurt and Arthur going out to go get the panther for the first time. But it's from the perspective of her playing the organ, and you can just see them through the window, and it feels really like they're you see them basically disappear into the darkness as she's playing this kind of sad. I don't know if it's a hymn or just another song that I don't know if it's an original piece for the movie, but it's really good. And then they start to get into the melodrama of the family in that same sequence, and in the background you can hear her playing the sad organ song, and I think those elements are really cool. And I like the look of I'm assuming it's a soundstage what they used for the house and all of that, but they have these awesome wide shots of like the whole house and the barn and the snow blowing and everything like that. It's a gorgeous film. So
it's very constructed.
Yeah. And once they get out into the wilderness, it really does feel huge in scale. And like that shot of when we're talking about Mitchum tumbling down the hill, like it's really zoomed out. He just looks like a small figure just doing flips down this giant thing until he lands into the ravine. He feels completely helpless in that moment. And there's a lot of moments like that.
He's doing that bit from Hot Rod.
Yeah,
essentially, yeah.
If you ever want to see Robert Mitchum do that, this is the movie.
Yeah, that's a great reference. So I thought this was awesome. And yeah, the ending is a little bit jarring just in the sense of it's like switched to the tone, but I do think because it's focused on Harold's, kind of discovering of him being a man, it makes sense. It's just that everything else is so depressing and isolating and sad that it just feels a little bit jarring when it gets to that. But it makes sense within the character. So it's not something that I hate. It was jarring. So yeah. Anyway, it's a 4 out of 5 for me.
For you, Meg.
Heard 4. Asked me in the winter, and it's probably 4.5. Yeah, it rules. It's like such a solid ensemble piece. It's the litmus test I compare all like bottle family dramas to. Like anytime there's an Oscar baity kind of like a family with secrets, having dinner, the secrets are going to come out. I'm like, okay, well, is it Track of the Cat? Is it that good? No.
Do you
great.
hate the mother but also understand her and sympathize with her
Yes.
at the same time?
Yes.
You know.
No, it's great, and I really enjoy the way that it flirts with, like you were saying, Josh, more mystical elements and even horror elements. Like the way it treats the stalking scenes is like something more akin to a horror film than a Western.
Yeah, they do like
yes.
that big zoom in on Arthur's face when he initially gets
Yeah.
killed, and it does feel like that kind of POV killer kind of thing going on.
POV getting eaten by a cougar.
Well, even also the silent build up to each brother waking the next one up and being like, listen, and you just hear the screaming cows and shit
Right.
like that. Like there's some suspense in there.
Yeah.
Yep. No, it's rock solid. It was a total discovery for me, a pleasant surprise I keep coming back to. And even if you're not like a huge Western person, you should check it out because it's nothing like a traditional Western.
That's true. If you just want to see one of the darkest family melodramas of its era, interspersed with scenes of Robert Mitchum being terrified of a mysterious black cat hiding in the snow.
That's the
This
thing.
is-
Like Kurt is such a fucking asshole for the first 15 minutes of the film, and you're just like, oh my god, this man is the devil incarnate. And then like for the other 2/3 of the film, he's just like getting
Helpless.
dunked on by nature, and it's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, it does humanize him a lot when it becomes like him against the wilderness, because he
Yeah.
just all his power is completely taken away from him.
Yep. Yep.
Well, yeah, and it shows how fragile that is, right? Like how fragile this entire family unit is, everything about it. Like it's literally being physically, mystically tested, basically. And Harold is the only one who seems to make it through the other side as a better person.
Yeah, I also like
And I will say, just like if the indigenous representation bothers you, like that's totally fine. It's a lot less egregious than than other westerns, and it's so badly done that I think you'll be okay.
It's kind of ridiculous.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also, all the characters that are nice treat him well, and all the characters that don't usually get eaten by a panther. So
That's true.
The film clearly like understands that it's more self-aware than other westerns at the time. So anyway, I know that's a barrier to entry for a lot of people, and that's totally justified. But I think when I first watched this movie the first time, I was like, oh no. And then he's like not really in it. And I was like, okay, that's fine.
Yeah. I also do like Grace's moment where she's calling out the family for just all their individual faults. It seems like she's one of the only characters that outright just says what's going on. And then also the similarities of being like trapped in the house. And then when she's telling Harold that at one point she could have left, but now she just feels like she's completely trapped in this black hole of a family. So,
Yeah, but
really
when
good
Kurt
stuff.
like doesn't come back, she's like, "This is your chance! Like, get out!"
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, she's like, you need to now, or you never will.
Yeah, and she was right because he's still there.
Yeah.
Yeah, but in case you thought a winter western couldn't get any darker, I think that is going to wrap it up for Track of the Cat from 1954, and we are going to be right back, and we are going to be talking about Cutthroat's 9.
An adventure in violence that will rip your heart out. Cutthroat's 9. Violence is their way of life. It's the one movie that you must not see alone. What you see here is only a sample of what is in store for you in Cutthroat's 9. For your protection, you will be given a terror mask free at the entrance. We urge you to use it if the violence is more than you can stand.
All right, we are back, and we are talking Cutthroat's 9, the 1972 Spanish spaghetti western horror film written and directed by one Joaquin Romero Marchand and co-written by Santiago Moncada, who clarified much of this film for me looking at that credit, because Jamie, you will be satisfied to learn he is also the co-writer on a film called The Bell from Hell, which we talked about with Nick Pinkerton, and All the Colors of the Dark by Sergio Martino. So both incredibly gothic Italian horror films with like Edgar Allan Poe qualities and like satanic cults and just
that makes a lot of sense.
The tone
given
of
when
this
this gets into like the nightmare fuel that it kind of has.
Absolutely. And this will be our first time talking about Joaquin Romero Marchant. He's a Spanish filmmaker born in Madrid and is basically considered by, from what I could find online, he is considered by Spanish critics to be the greatest Spanish Western director ever. Like he is like their equivalent to like Sergio Leone in terms of reputation.
Well, they were contemporaries, weren't they?
He actually predates Sergio Leone.
Right, I knew that.
So yeah, for them, they are, like he is like, he should be as well known as Leone is.
What's like I'm trying to think of like paella Western, croquette Western. I'm trying to think of like Spanish foods that we can like claim.
We can come up with a funny name for it. Yeah.
I named 2 foods and I've run out of Spanish food.
But like all Italian sort of spaghetti filmmakers, he got started in the 1950s doing comedies and thrillers and neorealist dramas, and eventually westerns by the time he hit the early 60s, which was pre-Leone and pre Fistful of Dollars. He was actually, the stuff that he was doing that wasn't this film was compared to. I just had to throw that one out there because basically, like it was more comparable to like a Hawks film. It was a little bit, eventually in the 60s it'd get a little bit dirtier and nastier, like in the spaghetti movement. But like the stuff that he's most famous for, actually reading it, Spanish critics actually, I think that this one overshadows the rest of his career too much, that his other Westerns are more like normal and traditional and very good at being those kinds of movies. He did one called Gunfight at Noon, Hour of Death, and he also did like a big Zorro movie, I guess, as well. And he also did one apparently co-written with Sergio Donati, who co-wrote Once Upon a Time in the West and The Big Gun Down and Raw Deal.
Ooh.
So he had like a pretty big 60s where I want to say like basically he was a spaghetti Western director before the spaghetti Western. And by the time the 70s rolled around, the Spanish industry had basically been overrun by the legendary big 3 Sergios: Leone, Corbucci, Salima, and the Spanish industry, because of the rise of Italian Westerns being as popular as they are, they kind of pivoted towards like making comedies. And so for Joaquin, in order to distinguish himself, and honestly, probably seeing what the Giallo filmmakers were ramping up in the early 70s with people like Bava and Argento and stuff, he decided that a straight up horror Western was the way to go, and made what would become this film.
A great business decision.
Honestly, it became incredibly controversial, and also one of the most successful films of his career. Yes. And once again, so much so that Spanish critics are actually incredibly annoyed that this is what he's most well known for.
I think like it's commonly, or it's often repeated that originally there was like no horror elements in the movie, and then like at some point, either like during production or after, probably during, someone was like, "Hey, like, what if?"
It's clearly meant to have horror elements. This is just the most devastating thing ever. Yeah. Like
you should spice it up.
The horror elements do kind of sneak up on you. Like a lot of the time, it does just feel like a very
it does feel like someone just cut it Western. In there.
Yeah, and then they'll just have these small moments that feel that are very like slasher heavy, like Fulci. Like I mean, they do straight up close ups of guts being cut open and like intestines falling out of the wound and stuff like that, like just things that you wouldn't normally see in a Western. But anytime they ramp up the violence, that's what they focus on. Like there's limbs being cut off. There's people's face being beaten in and just blood going everywhere. People being shot in the head, like on close up. It's
there's no kind
really
of
wild.
like gun duels. Like none of
Yeah,
the
it's
violence
so
in this film is
blunt.
like gentlemanly. Like there's no kind of like see at noon or whatever.
Yeah,
like
but
it's
almost
all
of it is
yeah.
just entirely. It happens very, very quickly, and it's usually like an impulsive decision, and 9 times out of 10, like you said, where it's not this gentlemanly thing where it's kind of two men versing each other or something like that. It's just people walking up to one another and blatantly killing them and
Or
giving them no chance at all.
my favorite gore moment in the film, which is just they wake up and someone is like, "Whoops, I rolled him into the fire. My bad." Oh no, we don't have to carry him anymore.
My mistake. Yeah.
Yeah, so nobody knows exactly how intrinsic to the film it was and how much was like a marketing team being like, yeah, you need to spice this one up a little bit, because there is also a hilarious like William Castle style like tactics that they were pulling with this film, where they gave it the tagline like possibly the most violent Euro Western ever made, and they were handing out quote unquote terror masks at the theater so that audience members could cover their eyes during all the nastiest
Which
parts.
is so funny
and
because like name me a part of the film where you'd have the time, like there's nothing is telegraphed in a way where you'd be like, oh shit, time to get my mask on. Like you'd be like, oh shit. like
it's already too late. It's already happening.
Yeah, like that. Yeah, it's kind of what I was saying. It's like it just happens so quickly. These people make such fast decisions, and the violence is just put right in front of you. Like it's always close up. It's always bloody. It's always gory.
Yeah, we just went from a CinemaScope wide shot heavy film to just like up inside someone's guts.
Yeah, exactly. It's so gritty.
Yeah, well, and also it has an incredibly, like Track of the Cat, I'll say, the one thing it has in common is that it has a very, very simple premise to it. Which for anyone who hasn't seen it, it is about this character, a Sergeant Brown, played by Claudio Undari, and his daughter, Kathy, played by Emma Cohen. Now, before I finish the rest of the log line, I just have to point out, friend of the pod, Will Sloan, had a very funny review of this movie that I just want you all to sit with while we talk about this movie, which is pretty crazy that the sergeant brought along his daughter to help him transport the chain gang of hardened criminals. Yeah. I wouldn't have done that personally.
Seems counterproductive, definitely.
I really
just want you to sit with that one a little bit.
I mean, no one makes good decisions in this movie.
It's just one of those things where maybe I missed it. I don't know where the detail was of like why she's necessarily there. She is just kind of part of the mission.
We all know why she's there, but I don't.
Well, yeah, unfortunately, yeah, we'll get to that. But Sergeant Brown is a dude who works for a prison, and he is escorting a chain gang of 7 various convicts of hilarious names that we will not be able to maintain or distinguish between after a little while. And it is not our fault. It is they all just have like names like Weasel or Torch. And Slim, I think, is one of them. And one's just called like Snake, I think.
There's Dandy Tom.
Yeah, you like that one.
I
think
Dandy
you were saying
Tom
off
it
pod.
always sounds like they're calling him Daddy, which is great.
Yes.
El Comanchero, I don't know what that means.
And then you have Dean.
Yeah, and then Dean.
Yeah. Yes, and each one of these characters is a very brutal convict who has earned life in prison and of infinite slave labor, essentially, and they are being transported from the mine where they do their slave labor towards their prison on the other side of the mountain in a wagon that is unfortunately a mining company wagon. So as a result, that escort is ambushed by bandits who are looking for gold, and obviously they're going, well, the gold's probably in the mining wagon, right? And
it
instead
says
they're
free
like,
gold here on the side.
yeah. And because there isn't a bunch of gold and instead there is a bunch of bearded dudes inside the wagon, they just start freaking out and killing soldiers. Yes.
Great.
And the wagon eventually capsizes at one point, and we'll break down all of these scenes as we talk about them. But the prisoners essentially are forced to continue their journey on foot, with Sergeant Brown and his daughter basically leading the chain gang at gunpoint to make their way by foot. But yeah, there is also some complications involving they might actually be transporting gold, and these characters are obviously a bunch of characters with histories of distrust and greed and violence. So
the right kind of people to be transporting gold is what I'm hearing.
Yes, exactly. I mean, if you're going to trust it with anyone,
Yeah.
I feel like, these are the guys. They've earned it.
And these are the types of characters and I guess prisoners that have kind of accepted where they are in life. It seems like they've kind of embraced the filth a little bit. Like I was talking about the guy that pissed himself when the guard's just like, he's like, can we please pull over? And the guard's like, no, just piss yourself. And he almost smiles at him while he does it. It's just kind of like they've embraced this.
He's like, I was hoping
lifestyle.
you'd say that.
Yeah. and even the sergeant, I mean, it's kind of cryptic at first, but he mentions in one of the first lines that he's like, a part of him is completely dead and buried back in the Golden State or Golden Park or something like that. And we learn why, but it just starts off right off the bat as like just a bunch of like almost ghosts of men, like shells of men that are traveling and have really nothing left in their lives, it seems.
Yeah, well, and similar, I guess I would say the other one thing I guess maybe it has in common with Track of the Cat, because we will get into the things that are very, very different about these films very shortly here. But one of them is obviously all of the gore that Jamie has already mentioned. But it is using the winter setting to stage a kind of survivalist Western.
Oh yeah.
Harshness.
They mentioned that.
I really, really love the opening credit that says like interior shot at the sound studio, exterior shot in the Pyrenees. Like I think I would love if more films did that. If during the opening credits they were like, "Hello, we are the assassination of Jesse James, shot near Tunnel Mountain in Alberta." Like I love that. I love that.
Yeah. Well, and I just, because you were mentioning the opening shots too. I really love all the shots of like the snowy mountainside and the all of the close-ups of like the horses kind of trudging through the snow and all of these guys, close-ups of their rusty little like looking chains that are sitting there, and there's this quality to it. Like, yes, eventually we are going to turn up the level of sort of severity and sort of bodily destruction that we are going to see to beyond spaghetti levels of violence to basically straight up Fulci
Can you imagine
levels.
if they
But it
disemboweled that guy and there was just spaghetti in there? Like, that's where spaghetti westerns got their name.
Yeah. Because I'd actually argue this is more violent than Fulci's Western that he made. Because I've actually seen his Western, 4 of the Apocalypse. And the film would make a good pairing with that, mostly because it's also just a film very targetedly about the like degrading experience of like being a side character in like a Western story, like not being like the bandits, but like being on like this weird sort of journey where you're just being harassed by all the various forces almost, and you're just like in a terrible position. And the kind of arduousness, like so much of 4 of the Apocalypse is those characters just having to like walk for days, and you're like, please give these people some food and water at some point. And there's a part in this where they even have to like straight up just start like carrying corpses around and stuff like that. But the style here is the main distinction, I would say. Between the two films, because there is just like, this has an insanely rough and gritty style of these
Which
close-ups
is not helped
of just
by
these.
The current working transfer, like the one you'll find on Tubi that looks great, does kind of look like it was found in a cave in the Pyrenees. Which I honestly think, much like The Keep, like the degradation is like a feature, not a bug. Do not adjust your television. That is fine.
Yeah, it feels like, I mean, I wouldn't call it by any means lo-fi or anything like that.
No.
But when it does these close-ups, and it's not even just of the gore, but it's of their dirty faces, and anytime they're having like a realization, or even when they do these flashbacks, a lot of it is very just close-up and intimate and filthy, and it is great. I love it. Even the way they establish like how these prisoners are put together, like when they have the big pan, a side pan over all the chains that are connected to their feet as the sergeant is explaining every single person. Like, it just feels really gritty, and it's great.
Yeah, well, and I like too, because I'd say for, you know, people out there who are fans of, I don't know, like films in the realm of, I guess you could say, like, you know, Great Silence, Hateful Eight, that kind of thing. I don't think this film is as angrily like political or despairing as The Great Silence.
No, I don't think this film has a political message outside of like, oh, these people are so bad. Like,
well, yeah, that's just it. Like for me, watching it, by the time
personal stories.
By the time you hit the end, I was like, oh, this is just more of like just like a horror version of the Treasure of Sierra Madre, where it's like literally just a depiction of greed as just this chaotic and ugly force, essentially, that just like infects these people, and they keep getting to the next person and the next person, and they just keep, how can I destroy this person's body? And it's really mean and nasty, and even like the good characters are pretty greedy or ruthless, or if they're not, they are tortured and destroyed for being like not terrible people. And like, it's just, it is at a certain point, this is just a movie about like which character can chop and char the other one into a piece of meat better than the other one, kind of deal.
Right.
And we do get some pretty interesting, I'd say, sort of momentary glimpses into things that, you know, you could see another movie kind of hammering home a little bit more. Like there is this whole part of the film where we find out like the chain gang is kind of being used as a mule for the mining company, which I kind of could have used maybe even a little bit of, just to find out, like, because there was a whole history kind of planned there where they might have said that, yeah, like the chains that they are wearing are made of gold, and
a great
actually
metaphor. Like not subtle, but like it's so good.
Yeah, like that's like that is like a kind of like a political angle of it, where they are like, yeah, like we wanted to transport the gold and we wanted to do it safer, and you know, we thought we'd just risk these guys' lives like Dirty Dozen style.
They're killers
or something
anyway.
like that.
Who cares?
Yeah, like who gives a shit? So like that's a cool element to it. And also then obviously having their greed brought out of them, and also having them all like physically you know, sort of the logistical complications of the fact that they are all strapped to one another with incredible value. And I think at one point, even one of the quotes is like, the life of each of us depends on the life of the rest, because they have to like drag people if anyone dies and stuff like that. So like there's some cool elements thrown in there for sure.
And then it results too, because like once certain people start to die off or they're killed, they still obviously want these gold chains, because it's going to make hopefully one of them rich, I guess, is probably their mindset. But then you get these great shots of like the limbs being cut off where the chain is connected to the ankle, and then they'll cut later on to like you've seen the dead guy lose his limb, and they go free, and then later on they'll be walking, and you just see that empty part of the chain that was once connected to a man just dragging along the dirt along with them. And it just kind of gets emptier and emptier as people separate and kill each other. And so
Great euphemism.
Yeah.
As they go their separate ways.
Yeah.
Thanks to a machete.
They do that. Yeah. Yeah, well, and you are just watching, like it's worth noting, like you are just watching a bunch of terrible people like rip each other apart, like limb from limb, basically. Like it is like straight up. They're going through the snowy mountainside. They're getting attacked by bandits. When we're introduced to each one of them, they're like, yeah, so that one is an arsonist who killed a bunch of people. That one's a gambler who killed a bunch of people. That one's a rapist who killed a bunch of people. And yeah, they're all doing hard labor.
Yeah.
And
The film starts,
and now
it's
all,
like, before you get upset about the terrible things that are about to happen to these men, like, they are very bad. And
every
even,
single
like,
one of them is like, they say chain gang for life and is a killer.
Yeah, exactly.
Every single one. So
yeah, and even Brown, like we learn that he is a part of his motivation to accompany the chain gang is that he thinks that one of them killed his wife.
Yeah, there's a whole bunch of like weird plot complications to this one, actually.
Yeah,
and the way they introduce the flashbacks are cool too, because they never. It's never that like fade into a flashback with a full context scene. It's always just images that kind of sporadically
just like
appear.
flashes.
Yeah, it's like the characters themselves are just thinking back to those really quick moments, and we as an audience get access to them briefly. And most of the time, it's just really simple stuff like a prisoner once had a wife and seemed like he was wealthy, but then, found her with another man. So he blatantly just shoots her in the back of the head in front of everybody at the restaurant. Just stuff like that. But it's
close up of her brain chunks flying everywhere.
Yeah,
Yep.
it's wild.
Wonderful.
And then even when they do like with the sergeant and Sarah Brown, his daughter, like when they do their flashbacks, it's all like in slow motion. It's silent. There's no dialogue, but you can see that, at one point at least they had kind of a happy family, or it's something to latch onto in life. But all of it is just, kind of sporadically put into the image is just kind of put on screen rather than it have a full scene in context. It's cool.
Yeah, and it's fascinating, like, because Brown is like, I am explicitly here to murder the man who killed my wife. Like, it makes it right off the bat, it makes him no better than them and on the same playing field. Like, really the only innocent is the daughter, which, again, might explain why she's there, so that we have, like, someone who's not depraved, although that does not work out well for her.
Especially by the end, I mean.
Yeah. But yeah, like truly not a good soul in sight.
Yeah, it's a hopeless film.
Yeah, and it is interesting that you like it presents that to you in dialogue up front. They're like, every single one of these is like a despicable person who the second they got off this chain, they would like kill you. And honestly, most of them already, there is this kind of like doomed quality to, like, they all kind of know where they're headed, like that sudden flashback that the one character has where he's just like, yeah, right before you die, you see your whole life. And they're like, how do you know that? And he was like, I got the noose at one point and it didn't kill me. And there's like that crazy intense close up of like the dude's hand pulling the rope as you can see the silhouette in the background start like raising higher and higher. It's just like a brief like 5-second shot that we essentially get while this guy is telling the story in the back of the wagon. And that's our introduction to all of these people. Then they are attacked by bandits, and there is this sort of like desperation quality to it as well, because the bandits basically say like, look, we've been waiting in this mountain for months and we are starving and we need something. And we knew that eventually a mining wagon would come through here. And you're telling me that you're just carrying a bunch of like slave laborers.
So like stinky men. Like,
yeah, they're like, yeah, they think about it, I think, but they're like, no, I don't think that we can. And they just start killing all of the various soldiers, bashing their skulls in with their gun barrels, slashing their throats with the knives, and you just see the wounds leaking everywhere. It's disgusting.
Yeah, it's very focused on the injuries that they're sustaining. Like they have shots of eyeballs like popping out of the sockets and stuff like that.
Again, Fulci just like rubbing his hands together, like, oh boy.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it definitely reminded me of that.
They were like, hey, why didn't you pull the eye out? What are you doing?
That's amateur stuff. Yeah, you didn't go all the way. You didn't have somebody stomp on an eyeball and it squished. Yeah.
Is there no splinters on set?
You're in a forest. There's splinters everywhere. Let's go.
Yeah. And also, I gotta say, there's one insane stunt in this movie that actually kind of depressed me a little bit. Because there's a part where they try to make a run for it in the wagon and on the horses, and there's a part where they make the horses do a straight up barrel roll,
yeah.
and I was like, that's just kind of fucked up.
Yeah, those horses are toppling down that hill, and it's a group of 4 that are all connected, so it just there's no control whatsoever.
Well, and the movie intentionally, like, it's so in your face about the physical destruction of what it's showing you. So it is like in an action movie when you would see a car do 10 flips in slow motion.
But it's horses.
That's how this is filmed. But it's like horses attached to a wagon, like falling down this hill. It's brutal.
There's even a moment where Sergeant Brown has to carry Sarah, and I think it's right before they get to the cabin, which is a crazy scene too. I think it's both the actual actors and he's carrying her over his shoulder, and at one point he just slips and falls, and it looks like she just crushes to the ground, and it looks incredibly painful. And I don't know if they got stunt people to do it, but it looked legitimately like them. So
I'm gonna go ahead and say no.
Yeah, I would figure that too with like the whole Italian production. So I'm not sure. but it looked painful. They're putting themselves on the line, horses and stars involved.
And yeah, it's I gotta say, I mean, because as we get further into this, we're just gonna be like talking about each depressing stacking element that they were just like, let's just throw another one in there. Oh yeah, what we haven't done that yet. All right, we'll do that. We'll add that one in there, and like you just get these characters where we are learning that Brown does have a little bit of a vested interest in getting these guys to the prison, because partially, a little bit at agreed, because he's got a little bit of the gold, like, that he knows about the gold, which they don't know about.
Right.
And they later do learn about it, and it kind of taints the entire process for everyone. And also Brown obviously has this revenge mission that he is partially on as well. So he's definitely has a very personal interest in what's happening here. And so much of this is just watching him like march the guys through the mud.
Well, for the first half of the film, and then something
for the first half of the film, we'll say, yes.
Yeah.
Something happens that it switches things up.
Yeah. Well, and did you, Jamie, did you spot the Darling Clementine thing that they do too, which I thought was a really perverse thing to have the guys do? They sing the Darling Clementine theme, but they sing like a grubby prisoners version of it. They changed the lyrics.
Oh, okay.
But they literally do the "Oh my darling."
Okay. Yeah. I was curious for some reason. Maybe it was the lyric changes, but I was like, I think I've heard this before, and for some reason I didn't think of Clementine. But yeah, that's a pretty dark take.
Yeah, the lyrics
definitely
are like, if you turn around, we're gonna fucking destroy you.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely a very ironic use of the "My Darling Clementine" theme as these just like horrible soldiers or prisoners are being marched through, and again having just so much like torturous, degrading detail to it, where like they have to execute horses on their way, or like one of the guys gets a broken leg due to the wagon doing its barrel roll that it was doing.
On account of the barrel roll.
Yes.
And even, surviving requires death too, where they have these the one shot of a deer just flying through the air and hitting the ground, so that
someone definitely just yeeted that deer from off screen.
Yeah, and then did a quick cut. Yeah, absolutely. And so I guess that, like, similar to Track of the Cat, like it has that wilderness survival element as well. And instead of, a day or two, they have to survive, I think it's like 6 days altogether. And they have to try to feed 7 to 8 mouths, and none of them like each other. They have no relationship. Like, even at least with the family.
Yeah, they're not even
drama,
trying here.
Yeah, at least with the family, like there's some love that just kind of comes with, they're with each other every day. They have to learn to work with each other. There's a ton of problems, as we discussed, but with these people, like they have no connection. Really, they're just like looking to one up each other every single moment that they can get. So those elements add up too, not just the fact that they're in snow and have no food or shelter or anything like that.
Well, and what these characters are capable of doing. Like, my favorite detail is the one where they have to carry the man with his broken leg through the cold, and it becomes such an annoyance to like the 6 or 7 men who have to do it, and Brown is forcing them to carry one of them, that in the middle of the night they just straight up strangle the dude who has a broken leg. And they're
and then
like,
Brown's well, you're still going to have to carry him. Nice try.
Yeah, they were like, hey, he was a heavy load. It was unnecessary. And yeah, they were just like, yeah, wrap him in a blanket, keep carrying him anyway, which then turns into a scene where they revolt against that, and they put his corpse in the campfire while he's sleeping. And so when the sergeant wakes up, he just wakes up next to this charred corpse, and all the goopy texture of his eyeballs sticking out. And they start chopping up his like charred, like ashen body and stuff like that. It's really like horribly detailed in that way. And I think that's when
the detail that like the horror was a rush job kind of like sus, because I'm just like, but it looks so good.
And it feels so essential to the film.
Yeah.
Like it like anytime and there's a ton of it. Like there really is.
So it does kind of feel like one of those kind of apocryphal kind of like repeated things, where I feel like someone said it and then 500 people repeated it. And I don't know. I'm suspicious.
Yeah.
Well, and there's too much buildup to it to be like, to like not have like it seems like they discuss those elements. Like if those elements weren't in there, it's just like we would know that stuff had
Well, also
had
just
happened.
practically speaking, like a lot of this is shot on location. Like you'd have to bring the goopy, charred, whatever dummy all the way up the Pyrenees. like there's planning involved in that. Like that's not like an on-set decision.
Yeah. Totally.
I hope
and
not.
To have the
'cause then
makeup
that
be as good
means
as it
someone
is.
died. They're like, we need a corpse.
Yeah. And around this point is when we learn where we get the kind of complicated element stacked on top, where one of the prisoners might have murdered his wife, Sarah's mom. And so it's partially a revenge mission, which we get in this horrible flashback of just a knife going into a gut. And just the intestines just falling out of his wife, and like that's his main memory of her. Like I'm not the other Western version of this would be like these pretty flashbacks of her smiling into the camera and him being like, "Oh, my wife," but no, he only remembers
playing under a bunch of like white sheets.
Yes, that's what you expect, and instead they're like, no, Fulci close up for that's the only thing he remembers about his wife. By the way,
I remember the color of her guts,
and then to like accent a little bit of the
strange
sadness.
color of your body's guts.
Yeah,
I think when Sarah has her flashbacks, it seems more like happy. It's like the one thing that she does remember, which adds sadness actually, because now she's in a completely different state of mind and
for zero reason.
Environment
we can glean.
Yeah, that we can decipher. Yeah, but all hers are like they're very bright, and there's a lot of like almost sunshine going through the forest that she's in, and she's hugging her father and her mother, and at one point it even shows them, I think, like on a swing and stuff. So it is very idyllic or something.
These flashbacks really hammer home that beards are contour. Like I get bamboozled every time I see those flashback scenes because I'm like, that's a different man. It's like, no, he doesn't have a beard.
Yeah, I actually didn't recognize him the first flashback. I was like, is this her boyfriend or something? He looks like 20 years younger because he actually just looks like a normal human and not like absolutely filthy and exhausted. Yeah.
Well, do you know what? He's a changed man. He's on a mission. His wife's been murdered. He's capable of doing all kinds of mean and nasty violence. I mean, she at one point straight up becomes concerned about what he's capable of.
Right.
Like during that scene where, it is revealed that he's kind of using the prisoners as mules without them knowing it, and that their chains are made of the gold, and they kind of go, oh my God, like you put us in danger. Like you put a target on us and, like didn't give a shit. And he's like, yeah, so what of it? And the one guy who challenges him, he shoots him in the face until his eye pops out, and then he machetes his leg off. So that they don't have to drag his body around, which you get in extreme detail of that machete just like going through his his skin and bone, and it just like tearing right off.
Yeah. And
then his daughter's like, I don't know about that. That feels like something that those guys would have done,
Are we the baddies?
Yeah.
But before she can get that thought even fully expressed through her head, probably for about like 30 seconds, she thinks that. And then they are overthrown at the cabin. Brown is strung up and beaten and cut, and she is raped in front of him in pretty horrible detail.
Yeah. Yeah. And this is also the end of his character. He is literally watches.
Yeah, you buried the lead there, Josh. He gets fatally cut.
Yeah, it's
well, yeah, I guess so. I was gonna say I don't know if he gets fatal. He doesn't get cut to death.
Sure,
he gets
sure.
set on fire, and we watch his skin melt off his face.
For splitting hairs here.
Yeah. But I did want to highlight like this straight up, like this sequence, what it reminded me of. This is like spaghetti western Death Wish. Like straight up, this is like a really horrible sequence of him witnessing his daughter, being assaulted in front of him, and he is being tortured until he literally passes out. And then they wait for him to wake up. And then they're like, by the way, you're never going to find out what happened to your wife, and set him on fire.
Yeah.
And
the whole cabin.
Him being on fire is what lights the rest of the cabin. And you get this incredible wide shot of the cabin on fire in the snowy mountains. And then it's the smash cut to the skeleton on fire that really threw me off, because you are straight up just watching he is being melted to his skeleton with fire. It is insane, actually, that's in the film.
And to set him up as kind of this, like, he's not a hero by any means, but at least just like the leading guy that we're kind of focused on his revenge or retribution or something along those lines. And in 40 minutes, I think it's like 45 minute mark, he's just burnt to a crisp.
This is like a 100-minute movie.
Yeah. He's just burnt to a crisp, literally to the bone. And now you're just left with his daughter.
You're like, wait a minute, he was the lead. He was the guy who was narrating the very beginning of the film.
Right, exactly.
What's happening?
And now you're left with Sarah being alone with all of these men that you just saw sexually assault her. So it's just like you feel as if, even though he wasn't a perfect human being, Sergeant Brown, there's like no hope for the one person in this movie that is kind.
Jamie, there's the one prisoner that she likes.
Guess, right.
Yeah, there's the one prisoner that
Dean.
she likes, who wants to protect her from the rest of them, and he does actually try to physically fight the other men before they attack her, and we do kind of it is funny because I guess maybe I have just seen enough of like murder mystery stories that I kind of went, well, there's got to be a reason that he kind of seems to care for her, other than he's like the one good murderer among them.
Yeah. Although he
which is funny.
Doesn't he say something like he didn't actually do what he was accused of, so he might not be technically a murderer,
which then we see that
moment,
he.
But
well, I was going to say, and then we see that he lies because
I was going to say
there's
he's not the most trustworthy of dudes.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, well, and I do like because like obviously there ends up being a big reveal at the very end of the film of why he's doing what he's doing, but during the section of the film you don't know that. He just seems like he's the one upstanding rapist, robbing murderer of some kind,
Well, and I think it's kind of like in that moment where you can kind of believe that at least one of these guys might not be exactly as evil as the sergeant was explaining.
And they'd be like, hey, look, it's getting a little extreme.
Right.
Yeah,
I'm like,
we're seeing some.
Is there any nuance to these guys at all? Like that kind of thing.
I'm seeing some crazy shit I've never seen before right now. People are melting to the bone, limbs are being chopped
be
off.
Something good in here. Yeah, exactly. Kind of desperate.
It does lead to some great scenes. Like one of my favorite beats in the film is the one, because it's just such a feat of strength, is the one where he's walking behind all of the other chain gang members as they're slowly walking through the forest. And there's a part where he goes, well, the one who, like really assaulted her, I'm going to strangle him to death. And so he goes up behind him silently, uses the chains, pulls him up by the neck, and lifts him into the air and strangles him to death. But he does so completely silently and while still keeping pace with the guys who are walking, which is just like an absurd physical thing to imagine someone doing, because just two guys just like walking through the forest, and behind them there's a man being strangled to death like in the air, being just kind of like floating behind them. It's a really bizarre thing, and just the image also of like his feet floating along the ground and stuff too. It's pretty cool. And also it leads to like a big farcical moment, which, hey, another connection to Track of the Cat, where one guy tumbles down the snowy ridge and all of them go because they're all chained together. Which is a great moment. I definitely liked that big fight. And I think there's also like a big flashback moment in there too, where like one of them is I think he killed like a Native American, and so there's a part where he is also like falling down a hill holding on to him in like a similar way. The flashbacks sometimes just kind of come out of nowhere, but I did really like them because there was this, a lot of them anyway, where we were being match cut with similar images, but they were just slightly less ugly, if that makes sense. Like they were kind of some of them were like
very brief reprieve.
Yeah, they're kind of like the lives that the characters used to live, which even if they were criminals, they were like, they were wearing nicer clothes, they were in like nicer environments.
The guy that
some of them almost like laundry, I'll take it.
The one guy that almost is like their, I don't know, pseudo leader or something like that. It seems like he was a wealthy man prior. And there's even a moment that's cool where they're trying to hunt again, because you previously see, I think it's Sergeant Brown that kills the first deer, and then when he's killed, they go on by themselves, and the one like kind of, I guess, leader tries to shoot the deer and misses, and they realize, like, have you ever shot a pistol like more than 3 feet? And then later on, you see that the only time he's really used one was when he shot his wife in the head, like 3 feet away from her. And it was, it's a very like cowardly move, but I just like that they kind of expose that his past a little bit, or his true character in that moment, and then you get the real context of it a little bit later on.
Yeah, well, and I do really like the gimmick that they bring up, that these characters are all shackled together by this incredibly valuable material, like gold. Like literally, gold is holding them all together. And obviously, it's as Meg said, it's like a very unsubtle metaphor. But like at the same time, it's just
this movie does not. If you came for this film looking for subtlety,
no. Well, but it's also just a cool like physical complication, because like these characters hate and distrust one another, but at the same time, they kind of also want to carry all of these chains and get to the next place together. So like there's a great scene, for example, of them all waiting for the train in a tunnel, because they're sitting there being like, let's wait for this train to come up and it'll break the chains and we'll kind of all free ourselves from each other, and we'll go and take this gold and we'll do something with that. And there's this part where all of their feet are like lined up against the train, and one dude goes, yeah, by the way, make sure the train doesn't get like dislodged and like run us all over or something. Briefly they think about that, they're like, well, I guess that could happen.
Or like the chain gets caught in the tracks as it moves by and they just get strangled or something.
Yeah, or it like drags them with them. It doesn't like completely break off. And I think that's the part too, Jamie, where they have the flashback you were mentioning earlier, where the guy is at the roulette tables. And the reason I bring this up is because I love the fact that the train sound rattling noises is what reminds him of the roulette table. So that's when we get that shot that comes through, is as the train starts rattling, you get the the little ball kind of going around and around and around, and then the woman obviously getting shot in the back of the head, because that's just that's what this movie is about.
Yeah,
it's like, okay, we went too long. We need something.
We need something to blow up.
We need something rotten and gruesome to show
some
everyone.
Bodily organ to spill out of a body.
Yeah, or we need some like surreal nightmare sequence where one of them starts like imagining being attacked by crows.
The fact and then that Brown this film ends with like a Lynchian just nightmare is so funny.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and like Brown like coming back to life and like reversing the footage of the cabin burning and like rebuilding so that he comes out like zombified to come like attack him and stuff like that. Apparently
in the fog and the smoke like he's a ghost. It's awesome. That was probably my favorite sequence of the whole film, honestly.
It's pretty good.
It's very stylish. And also apparently enough that people at the time were like confused about it. I found like one contemporary review that like someone legitimately thought that it was like, wait, is he a zombie? Like, is this happening?
That's so funny. It's like, just give it one more minute of context, man, and that answer will be brought to you. That's incredible. I almost wish that he did come back as a zombie though, and just started killing everybody.
Just straight up
style.
Well, that would be Fulci right there.
That would be Fulci, totally. Because then, and it would almost line up with like how he was set up as the lead, and then didn't get any of his vengeance that he was looking for or anything like that. So I could see an alternate version of this film where that happens, but
yeah. So then he becomes the reanimated cop looking for revenge. We've talked about a couple of those.
He becomes a maniac cop.
Yeah, exactly. There we go. It turned into a Bill Lustig movie as well. Speaking of another filthy guy who loves to destroy bodies on screen. But no, this has definitely a much bleaker sensibility, or at least like not as cartoonishly. It doesn't want to get that silly with it. Like it just wants to get more. I don't know what exactly the word is here. Like just more ruthless.
Let's look at
ruthless is good.
The advisory that Twitter sent me when they locked my account for posting a subreddit.
Because you posted screenshots of this, right? And you got locked.
No, I could have. I posted the severed head from Hereditary and the severed head from Silver Bullet, and Twitter said. Let's see if any of this rings true. Violating our rules against posting media depicting gratuitous gore. What are some highlights here? exposure to gratuitous gore, or is it? Oh yeah, okay. Here, intent to delight in cruelty or for sadistic pleasure. I feel like that.
Okay, well, yeah, there you go.
I'm like,
there you go.
That's all the movies I watch. I'm like,
Can I share this
right.
art? Come on.
yeah, I know. I'm like, it's not real, you idiots. Like, but yeah, that's definitely the vibe of this movie. It's just like, yeah, just posting severed heads on Twitter in the movie.
Well, yeah, I mean, like, consider the way that this ends, because these characters, again, like they have, you know, they are taking the daughter around with them to finish out their mission to get this gold and go back to being bandits or whatever it is that they're going to go back to their criminal lives. They've brutally murdered the protagonist of the film halfway through. They've now separated themselves from each other with the gold. And what is the first thing they do? They go to a bar and they just start fucking with people at the bar. And you immediately know that these guys have, because they have just such like a doomed reality, they just don't even know what it is to do than to be like a violent plaything. Yep. So when the one guy goes to the bar, he's like, oh yeah, by the way, I'm in prison because you said like I didn't pay for this drink or whatever. I put like $5 onto the table to buy a drink, and then you took it and said I didn't pay, and you're partially why I got in prison. So now it's time for us to have a little conversation. And he walks up to him. He straight up guts the dude, disembowels him, puts a hook in his back, and then literally pulls him up like into the rafters of the bar.
Yeah, and just lets him bleed out.
Yeah.
It's fucking crazy. And this is in front of the guards and the army that is, you know, that's sitting there as a group.
Yeah, and all the other people are like, dude, was that necessary? Like, did we really need to do like we have gold. We could use the gold to just like buy horses and get out of here. And they're like, no. You don't understand. I need to disembowel this man and show his disemboweled corpse and lift him up into the air so that his intestines fall all over the soldiers we have imprisoned watching us.
Yeah, he just had that, like, it was inside him and he needed to do it. It's wild because they have, like you said, they have the money to get whatever they want at the place, whether it be food, drinks, service, whatever. And he just has this kind of vengeance. He can't let go of what happened 3 years ago, and so he just brutally murders him. And it's wild. It is I don't know if you already said it, maybe I missed it, but it is very like Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Yes.
It is.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, when he like puts her on the meat hook
Yeah.
in the basement, it has that same kind of just like
Isn't Texas Chainsaw
really,
also 1974? Hold on.
1974. This is 1972.
Oh, okay. I wanted there to be like
so this
something
beat it.
in the water. So
He beat Toby Hooper.
Yeah.
Yeah, Toby saw this. He's like, I'm hooking it up.
Hook me up, baby.
I got this. And then but then the very last thing this has in store for you is that obviously the one good criminal who has been trying to help the daughter through this horrible situation that she has found herself in, he turns out to be the guy who killed her mom, and he drew the straw or the match or whatever it is to be like, who's going to go in there and who's going to do it. He just got unlucky and he grabbed it and he goes in there and he is revealed in the flashback, and she is just like, and I think that happens as he's dying, because we get his flashback as he's dying, right?
Right. I believe so.
And so there's like this whole thing where she's just like, well, that was the last guy to kind of live for. And he's having, so I don't know that she
I don't think she
Yes.
she never finds out technically, right? He doesn't
No,
say
that's
it.
his his subjective flashback that he's experiencing.
Which is, it's almost darker in a sense too, because like we as an audience now know his history, but she's still mourning him the same way that like you would mourn maybe a lover or something like that. And she'll never know exactly what happened. There's something about that too I find really devastating.
Yeah, like that's that, and you do wonder if she would go full suicide mission if she knew that.
If she knew, yeah, totally, because that was kind of
also
the one
it's like,
last thing
what are
she
the
was
other ways
latching
out?
onto, so.
Because I do really like that her final decision, which by the way is to grab a bunch of sticks of dynamite that are just sitting in the bar and just blow the entire bar up with the rest of the prisoners inside.
Her included.
She Her included, yeah.
It's really the only logical way that this movie can end, to be fair.
That's what it feels like.
All
by
of
the
the
end.
characters
It's just,
explode.
yeah, it's nothing but depravity the whole time. So you're just kind of like, well, yeah, I guess everyone's just gonna die. Like it doesn't feel like there's an out in any other sense.
It has that in common with The Great Silence. Do you want to see every
Sure.
character be just mercilessly shredded by the end of the film?
And the fact that she
yes.
just, as a character, has no hope left. That she includes herself in that explosion. She doesn't necessarily
She's the
have
ninth
to,
cutthroat.
but she
has
just
to like get her bones.
Yeah. She just feels like there's nothing left for her, so she destroys herself as well. It's crazy to watch. It really is. Like there really is no hope left in this movie. Like we were talking about the tonal change a little bit with Track of the Cat. This one just stays there, it's completely depressing the entire time. It's doomed.
You got
from the start.
you got your wish, Josh.
It's true. I got a giant wide shot of the entire bar exploding from the inside. And literally comes up Finn.
Yeah, they're like,
all right,
the
well,
end.
all right.
Everyone's dead. That's all you needed to know.
Josh stands
feel-good
up and
movie of the
applauds like
season.
in Citizen Kane.
I almost
Yes.
would love to see the reaction of the one officer that's coming up on the wagon as this is happening, and he's just like, "What the fuck?" But
well, I actually really like that detail because I think that's partially why she does it. Like, I think it is a case of she's just like, well, I've seen what these guys can do, and they are just going to continue to spread destruction even further. So let's just like end it right now. Well, because there is like that close up of the wagon pulling up, and you assume they're just going to kill those guys and take their wagon and keep on their destructive journey. So she's just like, yeah, I'm going to just nip this in the bud now. We're all going up in flames right now.
yeah, they're even looking through the window and discussing like what they're going to do when he arrives. So it's definitely one of those things she recognizes something is ongoing and will not stop. So she throws some dynamite at it, as you do.
Yeah. So, gotta say, this is pretty filthy. And Meg, you are... was this one that you say... This isn't one that you watch every year, is it? Is this one that you... Or is this the same thing?
That's what you said.
I mean, I watch it pretty, like, probably...
This is Meg's cozy Christmas time.
just throw it on.
Cuddle up with the family, the dog.
Well, I mean, it's on Tubi. Like, it's so accessible. I can't help it.
Yes. Yes.
No, I've definitely... I've watched it more times than than I probably should have.
The average person. Yeah.
Because I will say this is not like obviously, you know, like we've seen a lot of really horrible stuff on the show, but this is one that is intentionally trying to provoke. This is one that is
hopeless.
really...
What do you mean? No, I'm kidding.
This is very, very rotten, very vile stuff. Like there are
bunch of bad dudes.
There are basically no good people in this film, and the one or two who are like slightly better than the rest are basically like tortured in the most horrible way possible for being those members of the crew. Yeah. And I do just kind of have to respect the sheer commitment to how
it commits to the bit so hard. Like
like it is just pure
very
brutality.
Willy Wonka, you get nothing. Like,
90 minutes of devastation, hopelessness, loneliness, violence.
Imagine if this movie was 2 hours long. Like, thank God.
I know, right? Oh my God.
Yeah, so like if you were ever found yourself wondering like what if I wanted the harsh bleakness of my Sergio Corbucci, but I wanted it with that torturous splatter hellfire of my good friend Lucio Fulci. And this is the exact intersection of
see, when you describe
those
it
two
like
things.
that though, I'm like, yes, a good movie. Like,
yeah, no, it is like if we're pivoting towards Reductive Rating Round, this is a 4 for me, easy. Like this is again, I do think that at a certain point it is just stacking and escalating unpleasantness for the sake of doing it.
Yeah.
But luckily I am someone who, if that is done really effectively and it's done in a really well-made way, like I don't necessarily care that it's not mounted to anything deeper than, you know, these characters are incredibly greedy and chaotic, and they just, you know, they slowly, you know, go into a muddy hell with one another as a result of their decision making. And so that's definitely enough for me to justify it. And I do think for, you know, being, I don't know if this is our first time talking about a Spanish Western, but like it's pretty cool that, you know, here is like a Spanish filmmaker who, you know, seemed to be kind of overshadowed by the Italian market and was like, how do I do something different? How do I beat, you know, like the yeah, like I was doing what the Italian Western filmmakers were doing before they were, and you know, now they're doing what I was doing and doing it to more acclaim. So I guess I need to differentiate myself. And yeah, he made it a straight up indisputable. It's a horror film.
Yeah.
And I don't know, is there like an earlier Western horror?
Not without like a good deal of arguing. Like earlier when I was like, Track of the Cat has horror vibes. Like I think that's kind of like as far as you can go, but I really don't think that anything touches this.
No, like this is straight up a Italian horror splatter film.
Like
you
it's
know?
very like sad and rainy. But this film, like again, like that Twitter notice,
there's like some noirish shadows in the Western.
In its carnage in a way that I really like is more akin to a slasher film than any Western I've ever seen.
Yeah. It's
like bad vibes
so
really
much fun
abound
with it.
across Westerns, but like bad vibes plus like
this is evil
your
vibes.
insides coming out, like that's special.
Yeah, this was sent from hell, 100%.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
Yeah, and before I wrap up, just one last point for, I don't think we brought it up yet, the score.
Oh, yeah.
I thought the score was really well done, because it's like it has a mix of like the sort of like intense and rousing like horns that you'd hear in a spaghetti, but it's infused, I thought, really well with these like ominous downbeat like choruses, like lots of like oh like, you know, doing like these sort of weird vocal work.
What's interesting too is that they use a lot of the ominous and dark score stuff with the flashbacks that are actually expressing something a lot happier where the characters are. And so even when you get these images of like something nicer, the score is like, no, you're still not escaping the hell that you've been watching this entire time.
We're back to the you get nothing.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Good day, sir.
Yeah. And at a certain point when it builds to like, it just keeps stacking it and then just like, yeah, and they all exploded and died. Like there's a like when you say it is silly, but it does build to like, in my opinion, like I was, you know, there's an effective like hauntingness to it almost that I definitely kind of sat with after watching it.
It would be like pretty wild to watch like a traditional rousing heroic Western, like pro-American individualism, etc., and then watch this. Like that would be grade A whiplash.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. Just a John Wayne classic, and then bust into this.
Yeah.
I'm also gonna give it the 4. I think it's just like I have nothing but respect for how hopeless it feels and how constantly depraved it feels, and every character is like irredeemable. Even the leads that seem to be people you should maybe latch on to a little bit more. Maybe minus Sarah, and even her, like by the end, she's so hopeless that she blows herself up with the bad people in the cabin and everything like that. It's crazy. Like this, the evil vibes remind me of like what you'd see in like High Plains Drifter or something like that. But then you have the Fulci gore effects that are just so close up and detailed. He does not stray away from watching guts just come out of a torso and like we're seeing melted bodies. We're seeing people get their heads beaten in with the backs of guns. Like it's insanely brutal. It's one of the
people
most
being set on fire and you watching their skin like melt off of their body.
It's one of the most ruthless films that I've seen for sure, especially when it comes to just like Westerns specifically. And then adding not just the gore, but like the nightmare fuel of like the house being built in reverse, and the ghost of the Sergeant Brown coming back, and the birds. He's envisioning birds attacking him because they sense death, and there's just a lot of really amazing elements to this. So yeah, I'm gonna give it a 4 out of 5. Really good stuff. Check it out. It's on Tubi, if you want.
Easy 4 for me, obviously. I mean, it's like pretty, the amount of times where a film has like a notorious kind of aura around it about it being like especially provocative or like pushing the limit, like usually like it loses a bit of that edge over time, but I really think that Cutthroats 9 is like hasn't lost anything through the decades. like it still really packs a punch, and I think it's a very solid morose snowy western, and I also think it's a very good splatter gore film, and I think it marries those two elements very well, and I think Criterion are cowards for not including it in their collection.
Hell yeah.
Yeah. Listen up.
Maybe they couldn't
Janice.
wrestle the rights away from Tubi. Tubi was like, no.
We need
This is the backbone of our catalog. You can't have
Half our
this.
views come from Cutthroat's 9. No, it's good stuff. I assume there's a lot of Fulci heads who listen, and if you haven't watched this, then
Of course.
definitely worth checking out.
Yeah, if you're a fan of Fulci, you'll be a fan of this.
Yeah, Fulci was definitely a fan
Yeah.
of this, so
Yeah.
join him.
Yeah, and have just a miserable time.
Yeah.
Both of these
enjoy
films
it.
are
That's what
available
winter is all
on
about.
streaming.
Watch it Christmas morning.
Yes.
Yeah, it's perfect. It's perfect. But yeah, I think that's going to wrap it up for this week. That was Track of the Cat from 1954 and Cutthroats 9 from 1972, and our snowy, cozy vibes are underway thanks to Miss Meg
Oh
Shields.
my God, you're so welcome.
But Meg, this is usually the part of the show where if you've got anything to plug, we have you do that here. What's going on in your world? What's been going on in the writing?
I'm over at Film School Rejects. I have been doing horror streaming roundups. I do one every month. So if you like horror and you're like, I need to know about all the horror that I can stream this month, and I have 8 subscriptions, go check out that column. I basically do the work that I would do on my own to figure out like if I can do a franchise marathon or something, and then just have it in an article for people to read. It's like Cliff Notes, but for horror streaming. And then, I also do special effects breakdown columns over at Film School Rejects. I just did one that will be published soon on the melt sequence in The Devil's Reign. And
Don't post it on Twitter though.
no, because then I will get put in Twitter jail for delighting in gore. My whole brand.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's what's going on in writing world, is just writing over at Film School Rejects and watching a lot of snowy westerns. I dunked on them earlier, but the snowy western catalog over at Criterion is quite good. Could have been twice.
Yeah, what else
could have
is
been
there?
twice as long.
Ravenous is in there if people want more
Yes,
horror western
yes.
vibes. That's a good one.
Horror western vibes, but also with a banjo soundtrack by the guy who headlined the Gorillas and Michael Neiman. Hell yes.
Yeah.
And
This is going to be a little inside baseball. Did you know David Pryor did the DVD and Blu-ray work for that film?
somehow that makes so much sense.
Yeah, I spoke to him briefly about that, and he was just straight up like, he was like, yeah, so that movie kind of was flopping when it hit theatrical because they mismarketed it, and he helped put
Shocking.
He helped put the DVD package together for it, and it was a massive hit on DVD.
So he's a hero. Did you tell him?
So David Pryor saved Ravenous. Yes, I told him it was a great film.
The Great
So,
Silence, which we've
go check it out.
westerned. Oh my God, my brain, which we've mentioned a couple of times, is on the.
Yes, one of the show favorites. If anyone on this listening hasn't seen The Great Silence, shame on you. No,
Yeah.
I'm joking. Go watch it. It's
Little
wonderful.
bit of shame,
and
though.
little bit of shame. We have an episode on it.
McCabe
What did we pair that with? I don't remember. It's been so long.
Just The Great Silence
Yeah, I
again.
don't remember. Yeah, watch
I think
it
we did.
twice.
I think we did another Corbucci.
That makes sense.
But McCabe and Mrs. Miller is on there as well.
Shot
which is,
in North Vancouver, aggressively shot in North Vancouver. When I was watching it, my dad walked into the room and he was like, "Is that North Vancouver?" And I was like, "Yes." Day of the Outlaw is also very good. Highly recommend. That is a black and white snowy western.
I might need to watch that one. I also want to watch the Anthony Mann one, the Far Country with Jimmy Stewart. I love Anthony Mann. So
Have you seen
I'm curious how that one
The
is.
Naked Spur?
No, I think that's one of the ones I haven't. I was trying to think what's the other
That's
Anthony
a really
Mann that I've
excellent
seen.
Anthony Mann, Jimmy Stewart team up that actually has a lot in common with Cutthroats 9.
Ooh.
Where it's like a sheriff who basically does a long con with a group of convicts to try and get the entire bounty on them, and like there's a mid-film reveal of that he's playing them. I won't give it all away, but it's very, very good.
Cool. No, I definitely have to check that out. The one I was thinking I got confused with is Man of the West with Gary Cooper. That's the one. That's the other Anthony Mann that I really like that I've seen. But no, he's very good. So yeah, check out the winter westerns. There's a lot of them. Get into the vibe.
It's good. I really think that we need to reclaim December as the winter western month. Like, I think going from Halloween movies in October to noirs in November, I'm always like in December and I'm like, now what? Like, I don't want to watch. I can only watch so many Santa slashers. Like, I need something else. So I feel like this is a good alternative.
That's true, and that actually sets us up perfectly because this is the episode right before the Christmas week episode.
So everyone's just watched Cutthroats 9, like right before Christmas.
Yes, and so we were looking at it, and every previous year we've kind of done a Christmas themed episode, but we are slowly at a certain point we're going to run into Christmas themed genre things to talk about. So we decided this year we would give the patrons a very special treat for the Christmas episode.
I'm so scared.
Which is so next week for Christmas. For the Christmas episode, we have a special present for all of you, which is safety from edged weapons.
Oh my God.
We are going to be talking about a Canadian instructional video exploitation movie called Surviving Edged Weapons.
Let's go.
Which is 90 minutes of Canadian cops trying to figure out how to not die in knife accidents, which is basically, from what I understand, filmed as if it was like a hysterical propaganda movie and straight up like that Estes Perkle, like fire and brimstone style, like, preaching almost. So we're going to be talking about that, and we're going to be pairing it with another propaganda video you guys wanted us to cover that apparently has extreme horror vibes, exposing the satanic web.
We're gonna get so safe this holiday. Like, it's
that's just
great.
it. We're gonna
safety.
Yes, safety from Satan and safety from edged weapons,
from knives. That's right.
I mean, those are the two things you have to worry about. Honestly,
I feel like I've been waiting for years for this episode. I think it was only established this year, but I literally feel like I've been waiting since the beginning of the show to cover this.
The context here is that the patrons, this double feature has got second place 5 times in the voting poll. And so we really wanted to just give it to them. But at the same time, I feel like it is a good present. Like, they are going to learn not to go to the family holidays, and you're not going to get stabbed, and Satan won't take over you.
Honestly,
that crazy uncle isn't something to worry about anymore.
All the characters in the films we just talked about should have watched these instructional videos and might have survived.
Yes. They would have had a much better time.
Satan's painter
if they had just
all the knives.
If they had a bunch of Canadian cops explain to them that you don't necessarily have to take a knife at that angle.
No, it's the wrong angle.
So, I can't wait. Oh my God.
So that's what we're going to be talking about next week over on the Patreon, and then the week after, it's the big one, the best genre movies of 2022. We do it every year.
It's going to be an extravaganza. It's going to be long.
Jamie and I count down our top 10 favorite genre films that came out over the last 12 months exactly. And we also throw out a bunch of honorable mentions. That episode is always incredibly long because Jamie and I won't shut up about every little tiny direct-to-video movie that got a release, but it was actually secretly better than half the action movies that you saw in the theaters this year. And so that is what we'll be doing. Yeah. Get your... Well, that didn't get out into the theater, did it?
Oh, I don't know. I don't know. I just knew it was a big-budget movie.
I actually think Netflix did give it a theatrical release in Toronto, which is pretty embarrassing.
Wasn't it still like $100 million budget or something? I thought
it's their second.
I think it was more than that.
Oh
my God!
It's tied with the movie with Gal Gadot and Ryan Reynolds for their most expensive movie, I think.
Red Notice?
Yeah, I think it's like a $200 or $250 million thing.
It's a sarcastic amount of money.
Just burning it, essentially.
Yeah.
Needless to say, I do not think The Gray Man will be getting an honorable mention, but we will be talking about a lot of genre films that came out this year, which for the free listeners is obviously a big deal because they don't get the bonus transmissions where we talk about these films all year long. So this is going to be, which were our favorites. Sometimes Letterboxd is not clear. Not a simple rating will tell you. Jamie and I were going to be cramming in the last minute stats.
That's right.
Which one did I like slightly better? Is Mad God a top 10 or is it a top 5? Let's find out.
My top 7 are almost always like you could every other day it would be different. So that's just what it is. But the top 3 are usually pretty well thought
My
out.
favorite is which ones are actually genre movies and which ones aren't. It's always great debates. Which one is enough of a genre movie, Yeah. But yeah, so that's what we're going to be doing. It's going to be the big end of the year episode. So look forward to that. That'll be over on the main feed in 2 weeks. But that being said, I think that wraps it up for everything this week. Thanks so much for listening and keep it sleazy.
Keep it sleazy.